Hey, I'll join a little early just to talk to Conservative Carnage. Carnage, I am not receiving your messages on X. I've just checked again. The last messages I've received was from my friend Carlos 18 minutes ago, John Burke 6 days ago, Aftershock 6 days ago, Nylord on 11/25/23, Scott Pressler 11/22/23. So I don't know if there's someone that has an account similar to my name. I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing. I know, and I just bring it up because I know you're a good fan of the show, and I would definitely read your message if I got it, but I'm just not getting it. So just to let you know, welcome to Normal America Show, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a Spaces, primarily talking about the debate last evening, though we may also branch off into other topics. Hopefully I could get some people to join that space. John Burke won't be with us today, so it'll just be me running the show. John was actually at the debate last night. So the way these shows are going to work when I'm streaming to my channel and to Spaces, you like this? I love this sweater. I think it's, like, I know people say, like, ugly sweater. I thought this was a nice one. I bought this last December, and I feel like I never get a chance to wear it except in December, so here it is. You're probably going to see this shirt more times than you would like before Christmas is over. So, yeah, I know, Aftershock, but no, I like this one. I thought it's nice. Anyways, the way this is going to work is I'll probably talk, like your chat here, I'll probably bring up here and there, but a Spaces is different than just my show. The difference being my show is just my show. So, obviously, I could say whatever I want, whenever I want. Spaces, although it is my Spaces, especially if John's not here, I do want to encourage interaction from people in that space and give them a chance to talk and things like that. So hopefully, both ends up working simultaneously. I don't know many people that are doing this, that are doing Spaces that they're also streaming to their channel. So maybe I'm trend setting. So we're going to start that space now. And then I'm going to put that link here. And if you would like to join there, you certainly will be able to do so. Also, if you wouldn't mind retweeting that space, that would be wonderful. So we'll give it a couple seconds here. Let me get my headphones on. I don't know. I thought I'd talk about the debate a little last night, but I'd be happy to branch off into whatever topics people want. So here's your chance. If you want to come on and talk to me about something, and you have Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days, feel free to hop on. So we'll give that a couple seconds to be able to join. Yeah, I like the Crucibles community, their Discord chats. I think it's good stuff as well. One of these days, I'm going to be working with the Crucible to do their TikTok invasion. So we'll see how that goes. But I'd like to debate people more. I just never have time to set it up. And Aftershock did a good job of setting up debates I had with TikTok people. You saw how that went. They're worthless. And I haven't debated Pisco forever because I can't help myself now. Anytime I debate him, I'm going to bring up his fire alarm pulling defense because it colors everything that he seeks to talk about. But people could understand why, even though Pisco's bad faith, I enjoyed debating him because at least you could talk about issues. What's the rest of these people bring to the table? Not much. So we're just giving the Spaces a chance to fill out. I am supposed to be working with a friend of mine, let's be frank, later in the day. And hopefully we will be... he wants to talk about whether or not Trump should have been at the debates, which I could talk about that a little on the Spaces if that's what people want. I'm not so sure that'll be live, though. I think that might be a recorded interview we're going to do, and then he'll upload it to his chance. Yeah, of course, Alley Cat, right. My brother's doing okay. He was on here the other night while I was streaming Tuesday night, and he was chatting a lot. He's still in pain. I mean, I think, though, the worst part for him is his vision's blurry, which makes it difficult for him to read. That would be annoying and terrible for anyone. He goes back here in mid-December to see if he'll end up needing surgery on his eye. And he's certainly in pain, I would guess. So, but I think he's a trooper. He'll pull through. But thank you so much for inquiring. Yeah, conservative carnage. Did you hear me? I'm not trying to avoid you on X. I'm literally not getting your because I checked. I'm like, last time you're like, I messaged you again, and I was like, I'm not getting them. So that's what I said, Ogre. Worst case, I'll have a cool eye patch. That's the exact opposite, Zygmunt. That's the exact opposite take. If Trump thinks he's ahead and really ahead, why would he debate? It's like saying, well, if the Pittsburgh Steelers are up by 40 points, then they'd throw Hail Marys the whole time. No, they're going to run out the clock. That's what Trump's doing. I believe Trump believes he's ahead. I think Trump is ahead. And I think he thinks, unless I make any catastrophic failures, I'm not going to lose the nomination. I think if Trump thought he was behind, he'd be doing the debates. It is a Hail Mary to debate because there's only a chance you could say something that would end your career. So, all right. We're about to start the space here, so hopefully everyone will be able to hear it. Now, one thing I'll ask you all in my chat, that's right, Aftershock, it is different. He should debate. I want him to debate. I think he's afraid to debate. Right. Debate could really help you or really hurt you. So, Zygmunt, your argument is the reason Donald Trump's not debating is he thinks he's losing. Before I start the space, I just want to hear this. Zygmunt's saying Trump doesn't believe he's ahead, so Trump believes he's losing, and so he won't debate. Does that make sense to anyone? If Trump thought he was losing, he absolutely would debate. Okay, then what's your argument? Your argument was, and I'm quoting, if Trump thought he was really ahead and would remain ahead, he would debate. So you're saying that either Trump doesn't think he's ahead or he does think he's ahead, but thinks that debating would hurt him. I think that's the reasonable extrapolation of what you're saying. But go ahead. What's your argument? I would say Trump thinks he's ahead and thinks that debating could only hurt his chances. That's what I would say. That's my belief. I think if Trump thought he was losing, he absolutely would debate because he would be doing everything he can to change his perspectives. I don't understand. That's another way of saying you don't think he thinks he's winning. Okay, so let's say the media and everything saying he's up by 40 points. You're saying it's not that firm. He's only up by 20 points. If he was up by 40, he would debate? It makes no sense. It doesn't. This is traditional campaigning that's gone back through the ages. If you think that your position is firmly entrenched, you don't do anything that you're worried could rock the boat. Zygmunt, when I ran for office, the reason that I wanted to talk to every single person possible and to debate as much as possible was because I knew I wasn't the front runner. And therefore, my best chance was to get in front of as many people as possible to change my fortunes. Fred Keller, who ended up winning, he would have an incentive not to debate me. Why would he debate me? It could only harm him because he was far entrenched. Those that were heavily favored to win were unlikely to go in front of people and debate people. So we'll talk about it more, though. So let's start the space. Again, I'll put the link up. Anyone who wants to talk about this or any other issue, please join the space. If you would retweet it, I think I would be. Fred went to more places than others, but he didn't debate. Do you think Fred Keller would have debated me? Yes or no? Would Fred Keller have debated? And honestly, it's not a great example because Fred wasn't the front runner. I want to run for office here in my district now, District 15, Glenn Thompson. You think Glenn Thompson's debating me? Do you think? Glenn Thompson would have a 99% chance of beating me if things stayed pat. You think Glenn Thompson's going to say, I'm going to roll the dice and debate robnoerr? You think that's what he's going to do? What do you think? Hey, neighbor guy, I'm going to restart this space. I'm sorry, I didn't record it. I want it to be recorded, so give me 1 second. Neighbor guy, I know you're listening, so give me 1 second. There we go. Now I'm recording it. If you're the front runner in a field, unless you're extremely confident that debate's your strong suit, it doesn't make sense to debate strategically. Now, it makes sense if you're running because you want the best policies and the best person to win. I think debate's very important for that because it allows ideas to be exchanged and for people to make up. But that's not what Trump's doing. I think he should. But Trump sees it as, I'm ahead, why risk it? He may be wrong. Maybe Trump's not ahead. But if Trump truly, if I'm on Trump's team and I'm advising him like, I don't think you have the support that the numbers are showing. I don't. I would absolutely deserve to be fired immediately if my following advice is, then don't debate. Doing good. I think that's a boneheaded move of epic proportions. If you think that there's a chance that you're not going to win or that it's close or that you don't have support, it would be criminally stupid to not debate. All right, here we go. We're going to start the space. But Zygmunt, you're a good guy. I don't... All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Spaces with robnoerr. Normally, my co-host is John Burke, or I don't know, maybe I'm his co-host. I don't know exactly how that goes. John actually was at the GOP debate last night, and so he's actually coming home. So he's unable to join us today. Perhaps tomorrow we'll do a space with the both of us. But I always enjoy doing these spaces, even if I have less people listening because John and his audience aren't here. That's okay, though. We still enjoy doing these. I'm also simulcasting this to my channels, which are on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, and Kick. So as far as I know, not many people do this, do a space where they're simulcasting to their other channels that they stream at as well. So hopefully this is a trend set. You know, much like if you were watching on one of those channels right now, not just on Space, you can see my trend-setting sweater here that I have on just in time for the holiday season, right? So I got some Christmas lights to put up today. We put some up yesterday, but we're going to finish up today. It's nothing too heroic. I'm not getting on the roof or anything like that, but I still think it's going to look good. And our neighbors really appreciate the fact that we went with a Christmas dinosaur theme, so they've been reaching out to me saying that they're happy. Traditionally, my past Christmas decorations have been my neighbor that we share a driveway with. He's a very holiday spirit guy. He likes to dress up like the Grinch, and he has a lot of Grinch themed stuff on his house. And so I just wanted to run like one little string of lights across our yard into his so that it looked like he stole them all. I thought that counted. But my wife says now that Hank's old enough to care, it's time to actually get out there and put some decorations up. So he is pleased. Hank, my 2-year-old son, he'll be 3 here January 9th. He really enjoys the Christmas dinosaurs. They're those big inflatable ones we have setting up. So I think it'll be cool. All right, let's jump right in. So last night's GOP debate, let's talk all things about it. It was the rare debate where I actually did watch live, but because my phone was dying, I was unable to tweet as it was going on. Normally, I like to tweet my thoughts as it was going on. So I don't know if I'll remember everything. Also, I thought that, unfortunately, two key parts of the debate that I was watching, the feed stopped. One was when Ron DeSantis was being asked about sort of corruption in these institutions like the DOJ, which I think in retrospect I've heard looking at clips afterwards, his answer. But that's something that very much interests me. And the other was talking about Operation Warp Speed with Vivek. There is this sort of conspiracy to say that Rumble's feed cut off when it asked about warp speed because they didn't want their audience to hear criticism of Donald Trump. I just think that's, I mean, you're welcome to believe what you want, but I think that seems a little nonsensical. I mean, Rumble's owner or the person that's managing Rumble invited people like John Burke to the debate, who is heavily critical of Donald Trump. So I think if their goal was to just carry water for Donald Trump, that they wouldn't be doing things like that in the first place. Sometimes things happen. Now, I'll admit that I've been suspicious at times watching establishment news networks and sort of the things they were doing, but I just don't see that from Rumble yet, particularly when it was easy to go and find clips of what was said during that time as well. So I think it's far more likely, just to nip this in the bud, it's far more likely to me that what happened was there was technical issues that happened to occur around that time. Also, there were other times in the debate where people were being critical of Donald Trump, and it didn't seem that the feed went out then. So just wanted to clear that up to start. So other than that, enjoyed watching the debate. There's several ways to look at it. And so let's start to broach all of those. Now, as always, before I jump in here, this is a Spaces, and so I do want to hear from other people. I have a big mouth and can talk for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and often do, but I like to hear other people's opinions as well, and so this is your chance to give your opinion, even if you disagree with me. And so if you would like to join in on that effort, please go ahead and request speaker permission and we'll get you in here. And also, if you're listening on any of my platforms, if you wouldn't mind retweeting this space, so hopefully we can get some more people to join, I think that would be wonderful. So I'll put that link up in my chat now. And for those of you listening on Spaces, you obviously know the link because you're listening right now to that link. So, all right, let's jump in. I think the first way to look at this debate is, does it move the needle on who will be the inevitable winner of the Republican primary? I'd say probably not. The reason for that is I still think going away, Donald Trump is the favorite to win the primary. Now, there are caveats to that. I don't know that it's as locked up as some of the polling suggested. There is a valid criticism to be made that Trump people like to look at the polls when it shows they're winning and then like to discredit the polls when it shows that they're losing. That is a valid criticism. However, the polls showing that he's like 40 points up and things like that, and the direction of the polls that are showing that the needle's not moving, or if anything, it's moving slightly more towards Donald Trump, to me, it does seem to suggest then, just from what you could see and like the people that I'm talking to and things like that in the real world, it does seem to me like Trump's pretty much the runaway favorite at this point. Caveat to that being, he's an older person. Anything could happen to him health-wise that would cause him to drop out. His legal woes could mount to the point where he decides that he's not going to run. Or he could be assassinated, which is, basically what the mainstream media establishment and Democratic politicians are, gaslighting people into believing that he's going to be the next Hitler. If you do that often enough, something terrible could happen. So any of these things could happen that would mean even if Trump's the front runner, he could end up not securing the nomination. It could just be, too, that he says or does something stupid between now and the primary, or it could just be that there's a lot of undecided people in Iowa that decide that they're going to jump on a Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis bandwagon, and then things start to get interesting if one of them could take Trump out in in Iowa. So, but no, ultimately, I think because the guy that's the runaway frontrunner isn't there, these debates have limited importance. Now, as someone who just likes debate and also believes that candidates should be debating, let me be clear for those of you that don't listen. Most of the people listening have heard me say this. If I had to vote in the primary today, I would probably vote for Ron DeSantis. I think Vivek says the things that interest me the most, and I like his performance on the debate stage the most. However, I think it's reasonably a race between Trump, DeSantis, possibly Nikki Haley, though I think that's not going to happen anyways. Given that, if I think that there is someone that I would rather have over DeSantis or Trump, I'm not going to, quote, throw my vote away by voting for Vivek if I think in my state that my vote could make a difference. Because of that, I think that Ron DeSantis at this point has done enough to show that as a person who's primarily consisted primarily concern is weeding out corruption in our institutions. I think that DeSantis' actual policies that he's shown give me a better hope than Trump, whose recent speeches, debate performances, and things like that, not debate, I guess, but speeches, like his interview with Tucker Carlson, is basically him praising people like Gavin Newsom. I don't think Trump gets it. I don't think he gets the extent of the corruption still to this day. I hope I'm pleasantly proven wrong. I will absolutely vote for either DeSantis, Vivek, or Trump if they win the primary. Haley and Christie would be a different story. So I'm not saying I despise Trump. I certainly like him. I certainly like DeSantis. I certainly like Vivek. But I'm just telling you right now what my preference would be. So as that is the undercurrent, when I'm saying that I don't think the needle moves that much, I'm not saying that because I'm a Trump man who's rooting against DeSantis. I'm not saying that at all. It's quite the opposite. I wish that Trump, first off, I believe that Trump should be at these debates because I think that the notion that someone is guaranteed a slot as the presidential, hopeful is nonsensical. I think that even if Trump was the best person for the job in 2016, it does not mean he's the best person for the job in 2024. I don't think that DeSantis should have had to wait his turn. I think if he thought he was the best man for the job, that absolutely qualifies him and entitles him to run for president. I think that's absolutely fair, and I'm glad that he did. And I want to hear the best people go up against each other so I have the best idea of who to vote for. I understand why Trump's not at the debates. I understand that Trump feels that he's ahead, and by going to the debates, it could only harm him, and it would put him on a stage that basically then perceptually puts him as equals with these people that he's running against. By staying out of this, it puts him perceptually as above them, and it's one of the things I'll talk about in this debate. That other than Christie, and Christie's correct in this criticism, the other three don't really criticize Trump as much as they should. It's difficult to explain exactly what I mean by that, but hopefully I'll be able to do that by the end of this Spaces. I think that DeSantis needed to do a better job in all of these debates, setting it up as him versus Trump as opposed to him versus Nikki Haley. I think that's strategically a mistake. I think that he wins the battle against Nikki Haley, but does the person listening think, oh, okay, well, that means that he's better than Trump too? I don't necessarily. I don't feel that at all. Am I reading a script? I'm not reading a script, Ogre. Do you think that I have the energy, or that I'm just too lazy to write a script? What's the last thing I've written here? Yeah. No script here. So that's my take on Trump should be debating. He's not. Do I think that the debate moved the needle? Probably not on who wins the primary. As for the debate itself and who I thought won the debate, I think that the way I evaluate these debates is trying to look through the lens of which each candidate is trying to accomplish. Now, you might say, well, that's easy. Each candidate's trying to be the nominee for president. No. That might be true if you ask them, like, if you really, what you really as your end goal want. Yeah, maybe. But like Christie knows he's not going to be the nominee. Vivek knows he's not going to be the nominee, right? So what are they doing? What is their goal? And even if it is an attempt to become the nominee, what is their immediate overarching goal to help them accomplish that? And so looking at it, let's start at the bottom. Christie's goal is that he wants to set himself up to the donor class of basically being the person that's running that's Liz Cheney or Adam Kissinger. He wants to be the Republican candidate for the establishment Republicans that hate populism and hate Trump and don't like DeSantis and don't like Vivek. That's who he's there to be. And he knows he's not going to win, but he's setting himself up in the future for speaking fees, for, possible candidacies, to be that person that is telling the establishment, I'm a good little boy. That's what he's doing. And so his goal is to be the establishment Republican voice that is attacking Trump and Trump-like people. Populism. That's his goal. His goal is to try to do his best to bring back the neocon, George W. Bush, and to be on their side. Did he do a good job of it? Yeah, I actually thought he did. I thought he did. This was his best debate performance for that goal. Did this debate performance help him win the candidacy? Of course not. Of course it wasn't. Did he do a good job of saying that Trump was going to be a dictator and that the other candidates are afraid to criticize Trump? Yeah. And when I get to DeSantis, I'll talk about the worst points of DeSantis. Christie absolutely nailed DeSantis on the fact that DeSantis wouldn't answer many of these questions in a straightforward manner. And it's something that is exactly what I said in the last debate. If you followed me when I did the review of debate number 3, I said one of the things about DeSantis is I listened to some of his answers and I come away thinking I still don't know what he's really saying. For example, what I said in the third debate was, is he going to send troops to Ukraine? I don't know. They asked about Israel in the last debate. He was like, they specifically asked about Iran. And he was like, well, we got to stand up to Iranian aggression. I was like, right, but the question was, are you going to send troops? I don't know. I don't know if he's sending more money. They asked if he's going to send money to Ukraine. He's like, it's important, but a lot of that money is being spent fraudulently. Right. Does that mean you're going to send more or you're going to stop sending? I don't know. And Christie absolutely nails him on that. Now, let's move on to DeSantis next then. So I thought Christie, if I had to give Christie's debate performance for what he's trying to accomplish, I'd probably give him a B- to a C+. We'll go B-, right? Let's move to Ron DeSantis next. First off, let me say Ron DeSantis' best debate performance was that against Gavin Newsom, which I would have given an A- on that performance. I thought he did stellar. I thought he would have done even better if Sean Hannity wasn't a joke. I despise Sean Hannity, and I think that he was trying to debate Newsom instead of letting DeSantis do it, which stepped on DeSantis' toes a little. But no excuses, DeSantis still did great. So I think DeSantis does best in a one-on-one avenue. I really do. That's why I would love to see a DeSantis versus Trump debate. And I think DeSantis would handle Trump quite convincingly, if I'm just being honest. That's what I think would happen. And again, I say that as someone who still possibly might vote for Trump in the primary. So I don't have skin in the game in that, like, I'm a DeSantis only or I'm Trump only. I'm not that, I'd preferably they'd both do great. Better for me, That's how I look at it. So, now we're back to DeSantis is in, a debate format where all of these candidates are there. I thought he did. What's DeSantis' goal? DeSantis' goal should be to make it a 2-person race and beat Donald Trump. That should be his goal. Did he accomplish that last night? Somewhat. I thought when it came to the specific issues that were being debated, he pretty much outperformed anyone sans maybe Vivek, though I think people last night saw clearer than ever that Vivek and DeSantis are on the same team. They really are. And Haley and Christie are on the same team. That's what it is. And so DeSantis, and let me go a little further with this thought. This is getting a little, skirting the issue a little of the debate, but I actually don't think DeSantis hates Trump. I don't. I think DeSantis, he might hate him as a person, like personally, because he's like insulting his wife and stuff and people around him are so that's totally understandable. I get that. But as far as what Trump represented, particularly in 2016, and I think DeSantis even clearly says it or at least heavily alludes to, he's not the same man as he was in 2016. And what the deep state did to Trump in 2016 was one of the biggest crimes in this country. That's all good stuff. And I think you could see, unfortunately, Trump is petty to the point where it's like, oh, you're running against me, then I hate you. I'll take you down. I'll bury you. How dare you run against me? And I think DeSantis sees a lot of that as petty and garbage. But a lot of it is DeSantis has no choice but to fight Trump. Why? Because he wants to beat Trump. The reason Vivek has zero shot of winning the nomination, even if I think he's doing well in these debates, is because he is trying to be Trumpian and he's not criticizing Trump, which means that so many people that are Vivek supporters are going to be like, and that's why I'm voting for Trump. Because he's just making the case for Donald Trump, basically. And Christie's right to criticize Vivek specifically on he's not calling out Trump. Right. Because Vivek's goal is to set himself up as sort of an heir apparent to Trump, or to possibly, if Trump wins, to get some sort of seat in his cabinet. He's not really trying to beat Donald Trump. Right? DeSantis is. So DeSantis has no choice but to criticize Trump. I think he could have done it in ways that were better. I think his campaign hasn't been ran the best. And I blame that more on the people surrounding him and the people that are sort of his voices in social media and things like that. But nonetheless, it is what it is. No excuses. And so my criticism of DeSantis the entire debate season has been he is making it perceptually look like it's him versus Nikki Haley on the stage. Or it's him versus Christie. And that shouldn't be his goal. He should be coming out of these debates as clearly above the fray of the rest of these losers. I'm not necessarily saying they're losers, but that should be the perceptually what you're getting as an audience. It'd be like watching, when you wanted Tyson to fight Holyfield, and they're fighting all these other chumps. They should just dispense of them. That's what you would like to see. Of course, if the other people like Christie specifically calls him out or Nikki Haley specifically calls him out, so be it. Now, there could be another part of what DeSantis is doing, though I'm skeptical that this is happening, but it's beneficial to me. And that could be that DeSantis is saying, well, I'm going to hedge my bets, and at least if it's not me, I don't want it to be a neocon like Nikki Haley or Christie. So I'm going to spend time attacking that wing of the party. And that's fair, if that's what's going on. So I would give DeSantis a solid B last night. I think that he could have done a much better job of setting it up as him versus Trump as opposed to him versus Nikki Haley. So that's my big criticism of him. And I also think that there's a reasonable criticism leveled by Christie that when he specifically asked, would you send troops to defend Taiwan? He doesn't answer. Would you send troops to rescue the hostages in Israel? He doesn't answer. He doesn't. He's not giving. And then, the other time that Christie attacked him on this is because of Donald Trump's age, is he mentally fit to be president? I think he could have been more clear in his answer, DeSantis, but I at least thought that was an answer. His answer was, dude, the guy's 80. He's going to be older than Joe Biden was when he came into office, when he comes in this term. So we need someone that's more, to me, that's saying I'm not saying that he's as incompetent. And he even said that. I'm not saying he's as bad as Joe Biden, but does he have the fortitude? Does he have the constitution to be able to be putting in the hours at 80 years old? Probably not. But the other two questions I thought that, I think, now I understand why DeSantis doesn't want to answer those. It's difficult to say this in a debate performance. I don't even know if I could. Would you tell President Xi this is exactly what we're going to do? Now, it sounds like a cop-out, but it actually is a reasonable point. In fact, I was telling my wife, let's say that you're someone like me that's like, I don't know. I don't think I would send troops. Would I say that? One of the things that made Trump a strong foreign policy person that had strong deterrence from countries like Russia and China where they weren't invading is they probably didn't know what he would do. They probably bought the U.S. media's complaints of Trump that he was this unhinged lunatic that might just attack countries willy-nilly. You going to risk it if you're Russia and China in that world? But Ron DeSantis or any of the other people on stage, if they come out and they say like, nah, I'd never send troops. You think that, even if that's true, do you think that's a good message to send to China? They're like, oh, okay. Now, I'd still prefer as a voter to hear the truth. But I'm just saying, So that's where I stand with DeSantis. I thought that DeSantis' best part of the debate was how forceful he was willing to go after things like the transgender issue, while as forceful he was willing to go after things like cartels and things like that, how forceful he was going after the corrupt DOJ and things like that. I'd love to see more of that Ron DeSantis. I'm a single issue voter. Who's going to do the best to weed out corruption? Nikki Haley and Christie have made it quite clear that they are interested in entrenching that corruption even more. Trump says he'll weed out corruption. That's what he said in 2016. He didn't. DeSantis says he will. Okay, let's see. And Vivek says he will. So that's who the race is between, to me, those three. And it's basically a single issue voter because I think our corrupt institutions and dealing with them are primary to any other issue. Now let's talk about Nikki Haley's performance. Nikki Haley is trying to be a slightly light version of Christie. She represents the neocon wing that understands that they will eventually need Trump-like voters on their side. So she can't alienate Trump that much. She could criticize him, but she can't alienate the voters entirely. So whereas Christie doesn't have a chance to win, and so he is just Trump is the worst, he's a dictator, blah, 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 blah. People don't want to hear this, but it's true. Nikki Haley could somewhere be slightly to the other side of that. But she is definitely the Wall Street favorite at this point. She is, well, I don't want to say the Wall Street favorite. She is definitely the establishment class, donor class favorite at this point. She is just Dick Cheney. And Vivek's absolutely right to call her out. That's what she is. She wants to send troops and money all around the world. She'll work for places like BlackRock. She claims that we won't leave China to do business here. That's exactly what she did when she was governor. She is just a mouthpiece for them. Somewhat polished politician, but that's what she is. Period. She'll do whatever they tell her to do. Just like W. Bush, just like Dick Cheney. That's it. Donald Rumsfeld. That's who Nikki Haley is, right? But she can't be as much as Christie's the same way. It's just Christie knows he doesn't have a chance, so he could be the attack arm. It's almost like, you know how Vivek's out there and he's just say some crazy shit that's like Trumpian, right? So like Vivek is to Trump as Christie is to Haley. It's like the same thing. Yeah, there's a chance that Trump won't be the nominee. I started off talking about that. I still think Trump's the runaway favorite, but sure, there's a chance. Whether because he isn't able to run because he's in jail, he dies, something like that, or because there are possibilities that he could just lose as well. But I think he's far and away the front runner. Barring anything catastrophic happening, I think he wins. And I don't think these debates matter that much in that scheme of things. It matters in getting policies out there to Americans. So Nikki Haley's goal is then to be the favorite for the sort of donor class in the Republican Party. And I think she does a good job of that. I think she does a good job of, it's a good answer, regardless if you like her or not, when the criticism is you're taking all this money from the worst people that are sort of pushing DEI, people that are pushing not drilling here, but drilling in China, groups like BlackRock, groups like Boeing, military industrial complex people, that's who is supporting you. And she's like, so what? Let them give me money. I'm not going to listen to what they say. And you're just jealous because they're not giving you money. It's not a bad answer. I've said this myself. If I run for Congress again, right, and Northrop Grumman or whatever, how do you say their name? should have said Raytheon. If they come to me and they're like, hey, here's $1 million, I'll say, thank you very much. I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that you're basically put out of business. But I'll happily take your money. Thanks so much. You guys did it. Am I entitled? Should I not take that money? Now, I know the problem is people take money from groups like that and then end up, once they're in office, working for those groups. And maybe it's difficult. I don't know. No one's ever given me money. But I like to think that I would tell him to kick sand, you know? So that's what Nikki Haley's out there to do. She's supposed to be, you know, so, you know, I thought if one of the things, this has nothing to do with the moderation or anything, just an aside, I would like to see the sort of way that the debates are ran to be a little different. I love when you see debates like this where they give the people on stage an opportunity to ask questions of others, which they kind of did, but I think it should be more formal. Okay, in this round, we're coming back for a commercial break. Each candidate will get to ask one other candidate a question. You know, I would like to see that, because the question I would ask Nikki Haley is, and Christie, can you name me a country you wouldn't send money and troops to? Can you name one that you wouldn't want to invade? Ukraine, Israel, Iran, Yemen, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. God, name one. Can you do it? Isn't it amazing? Joe Rogan? No way. What about Joe Rogan? Isn't it amazing that every time something comes up where there's a neocon class that's like, yeah, I think we should send money or troops there, these same group of people every time are like, yep, absolutely, yeah. I look like Joe Rogan. Oh, please. I'm bald. That's about it. Oh. Isn't that amazing? I thought Nikki Haley had the worst performance of the night, which is hilarious because if you read the Wall Street Journal this morning, they were like, she's so great. Vivek basically demolished her. The high point of the debate, if you missed it, was Vivek Ramaswamy asking Nikki Haley to name 3 provinces that we should send troops to in Ukraine. And she couldn't. She couldn't do it. Could I? Probably not. But I'm not saying to send our sons and daughters over to die there. It was embarrassing. Like she had, even, yeah, you're right. Even her facial expressions, she's just like, It's brutal. Absolutely brutal. So, you know, I thought she did serviceable. You know, I would give her probably a C+. For her goal of being the point person, did she do anything that ruined, that they were like, oh my gosh, that, you know, Americans for Prosperity are like, well, we can't defend her now. No, I don't think she did. They're going to still prop her up. But I think perceptually it looked really bad. Which brings us to Vivek. How was Vivek's night? Pretty good. I thought he, again, did the best of anyone there. The big thing going against Vivek, actually, was something completely out of his control, which was the physical audience that was there was made up of a lot of people that were DeSantis supporters and Haley supporters. And so, as the guy who's going to be attacking Nikki Haley, there is a lot of perceptual boos. The feed I was watching the debate on, because I don't have whatever channel that it was on, which, by the way, is a criticism I have as well. I couldn't find... Do you ever know, like, I can't live stream a debate to YouTube. YouTube would kick me immediately. Would end my stream. Can't do that. Copyrighted. I didn't see any right-wingers. I saw David Pakman. So that's where I was watching. And easy, people like Pakman and them. You could almost watch David Pakman and know who you should vote for. Or any of the lefties that watch the debate. Because who do you think... Let me just ask you straight up. Who do you think David Pakman and any other lefty watched that debate last night? Who do you think they said did the best? I'll ask my chat here. Who do you think it was that they said did the best? Just take a guess. If you're some lefty commentator, who did the best in debates last night? Christie did the best, followed by Nikki Haley. Thank you so much. Appreciate the sub. Of course that's what they're going to say. Because they're out there attacking Trump and attacking the policies that left-wingers don't like. So just so you know, a vote for Chris Christie's a vote for... Did you ever notice, if you've followed me for a while, you'll see me where I'm on these panels, right? Where it'll be like, hey, I'm a lefty and I'm hosting this panel tonight, and we have 8 people here, and here we have 4 people on the left, and then we have 4 people on the right, and who do you like, Biden or Trump? On the left. And they're like, I like Biden, 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 Biden. Okay, now we'll go to the right. Biden, I'm not voting. And then me, I'm like, Trump? And then after these panels where I eviscerate these lefties, you know what they're all saying? Well, I like those other right-wingers. They're okay. I might disagree with them, but Rob's the worst. He's unhinged. Right. Not because I'm offensive or anything like that, but because I wouldn't kowtow to them and say, I agree with 90% of what you think. That's how you know. So when they're like, Chris Christie, yeah, he's good. Chris Christie, he did pretty good. Right. Because they hate Trump and they hate populism and they hate the fact that there are people that are willing to call out their bullshit and their policies. So they like the right-wingers that'll go along. They like the right-wingers that go, we completely agree with Joe Biden on Ukraine. Send more. In fact, the only disagreement we have is we didn't send enough money to Ukraine. They like that. They like the ones that say, no, we respect the FBI and the DOJ, and we think they should lock up all the January 6 people. They like that. They like the ones that say, we don't see any evidence that the FBI was involved in censorship of online people, particularly conservative. They like that. That's all good. They like the ones that say, we think that we should stay out of schools and let the schools teach the kids whatever they want about sexuality and stuff. They like that. That's all good. The Republicans that are really just Democrats, they like that. They ain't so much care for DeSantis or Vivek. In fact, David Pakman said DeSantis is out of it. He has no chance. Like, based on his performance last night, it's now Nikki Haley or bust. What? Even if you don't like DeSantis, anyone who could come to that conclusion watching the debate last night's clearly too partisan to be weighing in. If I watch the Democrat debates and it's Joe Biden versus RFK, Joe Biden theoretically could absolutely crush RFK in the debate. But I'm going to be like, I like RFK more than Biden. Of course. Because RFK is against a lot of the policies that the Biden administration have done. So I think I give Vivek sort of an A-. I thought that he had the best performance. And to me, the high point of Vivek was, of course, the name 3 provinces. And then when Christie, if you saw this clip, he says Nikki Haley couldn't even, she wants to send your sons and daughters. She couldn't even name 3 provinces in Ukraine that she wants to send them to, which Haley was unable to do. And go back and watch this if you think I'm kidding. You'll notice this behavior. I've done enough of these panel debates and stuff, and I did debates in real life too. I see exactly what's happening. Chris Christie jumps in to save her. The white knight, Chris Christie, he gonna jump in to save Nikki Haley because he knows Haley doesn't have a response. So that's when Chris Christie, whose entire campaign has been, I hate Donald Trump and I'm going to attack and insult Donald Trump. It's like, I can't stand Vivek. You could say you disagree with Nikki Haley, but she's a smart, good woman, damn it. And I'm not going to listen to you insult people. Please, take a walk, Christie. Go cheer for more trans surgery of kids, Chris Christie, okay? Thank you so much, Liam. I appreciate it. That's what Christie was doing. He realized the aloof, strong debater, Nikki Haley, literally didn't have anything to say. Had nothing to say. Was called out and had no clue what to say. So Chris Christie jumped in to try to deflect from it. And good on Vivek for saying, so what we learn here, Chris Christie also can't name 3 provinces that he wants to send. Absolutely true. And then he said, go have a meal and quit, which was a weight joke. As a fat guy, I approve. I don't know that I could make that joke. If I was on stage, I'd be like, why don't you go get something to eat, Christy? And he'd be like, you probably weigh more than me. I'd say, well, yeah, I'll go to dinner with you if you're paying, you fat bastard. It did just kind of come out. It was funny, though. Everyone's thinking it. Two other things to talk about, overarchingly with the performance. Then I'd love to get some viewer calls. I thought this was the best moderated debate of the ones that we've seen. I still think that the questions, you could make a case. I understand why they are going the direction they were, particularly so many questions about Donald Trump. I get that, right? But it's so absurd to me that there aren't questions that are directly geared to the corruption of the Biden administration. None. Ever. So that's a little annoying. But aside from that, I think they ran a nice mix of trying to rein people in, you could tell they had a timer and they were trying to give everyone, it wasn't just like 1 minute answers. They gave them like a couple minutes, which is good. I didn't feel that there were so many questions like in the Newsom DeSantis debate. It was like Sean Hannity not only was interjecting every question and arguing against Newsom, but he had so many different topics and questions that they didn't give it any chance to really get into details on any of the topics, particularly when DeSantis would actually be like, dude, like, let's look at the people fleeing your state. Let's look at you at the French Laundry. Let's look at, this gender queer book. Let's look at, and immediately Hannity would come in and basically, in an attempt to harm Newsom, save Newsom. So I thought, as far as moderation goes, I was happy with it last night. It's at least compared to other moderation that we've seen. So kudos to Megyn Kelly and company. I thought they did a pretty good job. I did. And, I guess if you're a Christie fan, maybe you weren't happy at the moderation because to me it felt like he got less time than everyone else, but he should get less time. What's he really have to say other than Trump bad? So there's that. Right, we don't elect Biden, but we're trying to elect the person that could beat Biden. So I'd like to hear what they have to say about Biden. Make sense? The last thing I'll say is I thought that you started to see sort of fault lines being drawn. It's a weird thing with Vivek because I think that he has brushed off legitimate criticism of things he said in the past and how he seemed to have changed. And I think he's a smooth talker and he has an answer. Oh, that wasn't a how-to manual, that was a warning, things like that. But I do question how much of it is that he is just a very persuasive dude who knows how to speak to someone like me. Oh, before I get to this, I did want to say the high point for Vivek, though, wasn't really just the Nikki Haley burn. For me, it was when he correctly said that actually what a president can do is manage the executive branch, and that's the real problem. Those are the people that run the country. That is absolutely spot on. And if you don't realize that, you won't affect change in ending this corruption. If you don't understand that the people that run the FBI and the IRS and the EPA, they run the country more than Joe Biden, then you're not going to be able to fix the problem. And Vivek absolutely is on point where he says those that say we'll work with Congress to get this done are missing the point. The real problem is the executive agencies. So he promises to eliminate 70%. Probably not enough, but still good. Probably the correct answer is closer to 95% elimination. Now, you're going to lose those people's votes. The people in D.C. that rely on working for the federal government, they're going to be upset that they're going to have to go get a real job that isn't targeting conservative Americans. That'll upset them. Sorry. Plenty of jobs in home health care dealing with people with disabilities like I have. We'll get you a job as long as you be caring and compassionate to a person with disabilities. So that, to me, was the high point. And I don't think DeSantis does necessarily bad when he's talking about corruption and stuff, but Vivek knocks it out of the park. Knocks it out of the park on that question. There you have it. Nikki Haley, Mythos TV says Nikki Haley looks good to me. Trump's a no-no. DeSantis is okay. When I obviously won't change my opinion based on what just other people in my position or just random commentators say. But I will say it is a little worrying when you see neocon Nikki Haley supporters saying DeSantis would be okay. It makes you scratch your head about DeSantis. They really hate Vivek. That's a good sign to me. Yes, I know the neocons hate Vivek, and I know they hate Trump. Got it. We know.
Anyone who's willing, I like Nikki.
By the way, Mythos, are you of a fighting age male? Have you volunteered to go over to Ukraine and fight for them? You like Nikki, right? It's very important. My goodness, they'll be in Moldova this time next week if you don't go. Send yourself over there. How much money do you really need to live? Looks like you have access to a computer. Why don't you send some of that hard-earned cash, to the countries around the world that you really care about with Nikki Haley as opposed to, benefiting yourself and the people of this country. Sounds good, right? Thanks for your opinion, Nikki Haley supporter. Good stuff. But feel free to join the space and call in. You could tell us why she did so great. Maybe you could name the 3 provinces as you're furiously Googling right now. You could see that there is some collaboration and respect between like Ron DeSantis and Vivek. Vivek actually says early in the debate, he's like, they get him with this sort of gotcha. And by the way, another kudos to Megyn Kelly and company. They had questions that were uncomfortable about personal statements that all 4 people said on stage, which is good. They should do that. And so to Vivek, the question was, you've seemed to waffle back and forth saying that we need unity, but then also calling your competitors on stage corrupt. At one point you said they were corrupt, and then you said there were good people on the stage. Well, what do you say? And I thought he made a humorous joke. He's like, well, Burgum's not here anymore, implying that he was saying Burgum was the good guy that was on stage. But then he says, no, Ron DeSantis is a good guy, which is another way of saying Nikki Haley and Christie aren't, which is true. I think that you could see, and I even heard reports of people that were there live saying that like DeSantis and Vivek are like shaking hands and chatting each other up during the breaks where you couldn't see. I think they respect each other. I think Vivek is smart and he's out for his personal agenda is that he wants to be the heir apparent to Trump, or he wants to have some sort of cabinet position with Trump or something like that. He understands there are millions upon millions of people that are fed up with the old system of the establishment Republicans and Democrats, and he sees that there is room in the future for someone to be a young leader for those people that are fed up. Thanks so much, Gizmo. I appreciate the cheer. But I also think he sees that people like Ron DeSantis certainly have a spot in that future. I think that he probably wouldn't pick a side between DeSantis and Trump. He's going to try to run that middle ground. Like, I have criticisms of both of them, but I think they're both good. And I believe Vivek believes that. And I think DeSantis probably looks at Vivek like you look at your friend that goes to the party with you and he's doing keg stands and beer bongs and shit. He's a lot of fun, but you're also not going to trust him to sort of lead the expedition. He's usually someone that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. He's a great guy, but I think that's probably how DeSantis looks at Vivek. Like, his heart's in the right place. He's great. But I think that he, because I think DeSantis, in this, I don't mean this in a negative way. I think DeSantis is a fighter and that he has certainly fought against corruption and like corrupt media and stuff like that. But I think that at his heart, he's more of a policy guy. And I think that it's not necessarily in DeSantis' blood to be as bombastic as Vivek is. That's what I think. So I think that if you could literally put them, like if you were just smoking cigars and you could talk to them and they trusted you as a friend to know you wouldn't go tell anyone else. And you could talk to DeSantis and say, hey, of the people on the debate stage, if it wasn't you, who would it be? He'd be like, Vivek. And I think if you could ask Vivek the same, hell, you probably wouldn't even need to be in a private room. Vivek would probably say it publicly. If it wasn't me, it'd be DeSantis. Easily. That's barring Trump, because Trump's not on the stage. And so I do see that there's a coalition there. And I think Vivek is positioning himself, I hope, when he eventually is out of the race and when we eventually have a primary nominee, I think Vivek will be out there trying to tell DeSantis people, you need to get on board with Trump. Or if DeSantis would somehow win, telling Trump people, you need to get on board with DeSantis. I think that's what Vivek will be doing, and I will applaud him in that. That is what he should be doing. But I think it's funny because we are in such a crazy time politically, not just because of sort of the rise of authoritarianism we see with the establishment, but also because of the unique tools that we have to be able to talk about politics in ways that we never have. Social media. That it's even more than in the past likely that people develop an affinity for a candidate and sort of almost embrace like a sports-like feeling to them, right? Like I have this one friend that always makes this quip when, like, I'm a Pittsburgh sports fan, you know, so if I'm talking about the Pirates or the Penguins, we'll say the Penguins, you know, and I'm like, oh man, we almost won that game last night. He'll be like, we? You don't play for him. What are you talking about? But you take on that, you know, it's our team. It's like, that's how people treat DeSantis. That's how people treat Trump. Some go way too far. Some treat it like a cult. But that's what's going on. And I think there's less and less people like me that are like, I just want the best person to win. I'm willing to criticize my guy when I feel it's necessary. I'm willing to change my mind. Thank you, Ross. I appreciate the sub. 10-6 tonight. We'll see. Yeah, and I think that it's getting even more like it. So there are people that are just like DeSantis or bust. You know, and they'll be like, you know, Vivek sucked, blah, 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 in the previous debates. And I'd be trying to tell them, like, you understand Vivek's actually sort of the wingman to Ron DeSantis. He's certainly Trump's wingman. But because a lot of the populist policies that DeSantis like are what Trump claimed to support, like building the wall or holding people accountable for COVID and lockdowns or rooting out corruption at the DOJ. These are things that Trump supporters like about Trump and think Trump will do. So when Vivek's talking about that in a sort of, let me backtrack just a second. It's also difficult because a lot of people, this wouldn't be my style. I think that Trump sort of proved that you could go out there and speak in what would be considered a radical way and still win a general election because enough people are fed up with our government not working for them. But the traditional way to view politics is in the primary, you're speaking more towards the further wings of your base. Take an issue like abortion. If you were, if you had no morals and you literally were just a machine trying to win an election, trying to become president, and you didn't really believe anything, so you'd say whatever you thought could help you win. To win the Republican primary, you would be massively pro-life. Massively. But then in the general, you're going to have to go towards the center. So you might say like, nope, life begins at conception, no abortions. I'd push a 5-week abortion ban. That might help you in the Republican primary. That's going to hurt you in the general. It'll hurt you in the general election. So then what you want to do is you want to say just enough to win the primary, but that also sets you up in the general to not make you sound too extreme. So you might say something, I thought Nikki Haley, there you go, Mythos, in the third debate actually had the best answer on abortion. I personally am against it, but I also think it should be left up to the states, and then it won't be possible to get the votes for a president to issue a ban like that anyways. So we should be focused on things that we can actually change. That's probably the best answer that if you're looking for an answer on abortion and you're a right-winger, probably isn't your favorite answer, but you could live with it. And you could live with that in the general election. Whereas if you just come out and you say, no, I'd pass a 5-week abortion ban as president, there are people that are just like, well, I can't live with that in the general. But what you want is someone who can say that shit to be your wingman. Similarly, when it comes to attacking people, right? You don't want to necessarily, if you're DeSantis, you're not going to, and he's done a good job of this. He's not attacking the character of someone like Trump, but your team could do it. People that support you could do it. It's one of the arguments I had with Dr. Oz's team going against Fetterman. His campaign manager, or it wasn't the campaign manager, but someone really high up in his campaign made a joke about John Fetterman's stroke. It was like, well, basically if he would have ate more apples, he wouldn't have had a stroke, implying it was because he's overweight or something. It's like, you can't do that. I could do that as some rando online, but you can't have someone high up in Dr. Oz. The dude's a doctor. You see what I'm saying? So, interesting. Interesting that, there was so much animosity, I think in the past from a lot of people I talked to that are DeSantis supporters towards Vivek, where to me, I saw it's the opposite. Vivek's making criticism of DeSantis, but you could even tell by the criticisms he's making. It's very light. It's like DeSantis didn't go far enough type stuff, which you would expect in any election. But if Trump drops out tomorrow and DeSantis wins the primary, a lot of the stuff Vivek said is exactly the type of stuff that the DeSantis campaign's wanting to get out in the ether. And then they might not go as far as Vivek, we're not going to eliminate 70%, but he's on the right track. So I thought last night I started to see some DeSantis people like, hey, looks like Vivek and DeSantis are buddies. Right. That's what I've thought the entire time. They're both populist, or at least populist adjacent. At least that's what they claim to be. All right. So I'll put the link out again to the spaces we got. If you'd like to talk, please just put a request in to speak. So we got neighbor guy. Go ahead. Would you like to give your thoughts on the debate or anything else? Oh, you're muted. Not quite ready to speak yet. No problem. So put the link out in my channels here.
How about?
Go ahead.
How about now?
Yep, you're good.
All right, perfect. No, so it is kind of funny because you'll see from last night these guys breaking into roles and what they think that they're going to do in the general, right? I think you've got Christie who's trying to go after the Democrats that can't vote for Biden because of where we are today. And then, Nikki Haley kind of going after the boomer Republicans of however long ago. I am curious what your thoughts are, though. What are the chances of Vivek getting the VP role? And then, off that, too, if he were to get elected, does he even a quarter of the things that he wants to get done as far as gutting the deep state goes? Yep, I'll unhook and hear what you got to think.
All right, yeah. So to sort of go, let's start with the first point. What is the chance of him being nominated as VP? I don't think that that's very high. I think that Trump doesn't want someone who's more Trumpian than him to be his vice president. I think that if he were to accept someone like that, it would have to be someone that he saw brought him a tangible benefit in trying to win a general election. So you've heard the name Tucker Carlson being floated around. Tucker's someone who has enough juice that could bring Trump extra votes. I don't know what extra votes Vivek brings Trump. Many of the people that believe, if it's Trump in the general, most of the people that would like what Vivek's having to say are going to vote for Trump in the general. There would probably be a handful of people that'll be like, I like what Trump's saying, but he won't demolish the deep state, so therefore I won't vote for Trump. But then who are you voting for? Like Biden? Of course not. So I don't see the tangible benefit necessarily that it brings Trump. I think that more likely Vivek would be someone that would be positioned to be elsewhere on the cabinet. Where he might be able to do actual policy prescriptions that would sort of rein in some of the deep state. To the second question, what are the chances that he would actually do some of the things that he's saying? Slim. The same is true of DeSantis. The same is true of Trump. The truth is that I'm far more optimistic culturally that we're making movements in the right direction in this country than I am politically. I think the chances of any Republican winning are not very high. I hope that I'm pleasantly proven wrong. And I think once they're in there, it is a massive uphill battle to sort of end this bureaucracy. For example, if Vivek would win, hypothetically, and say I'm going to eliminate 70%, I don't think, if you're the type of person that believes that there's possible fraud in voting systems and things like that, and that they intentionally locked us down with COVID to try to demolish the economy and stuff like that, how far do you think they'd be willing to go to stop the actual end of the bureaucratic state? The things you would see, the scandals that would pop up, the attacks that would be launched at Vivek would be insane. There would be pushback from people in his own party because most of them also work for that bureaucratic state and not for their people. So there'd be pushback from the Mitch McConnells and the Paul Ryans and the Mitt Romneys of the world. There would be massive pushback for all of them. There would be scandal after scandal. The entire mainstream news would be on fire. So they would be, the tangential people like Elon Musk, just because you'd be allowed to talk in a truthful way on X, would be attacked even worse. The scandals that would come out against Elon Musk would be even worse. There would be, trial after trial after trial, investigation after investigation after investigation of Vivek. So would he want to do those things? Well, let's say that I can't read his mind. I don't even know if he would want to do them or if he's just saying, yeah, that's what we should do, but I know it'll never be able to be accomplished. But let's say he really wanted to do it and tried. Even then, I would say to get to the effect that he's talking about, like a 70% reduction in people in sort of these bureaucratic positions, I think is probably not going to happen. It should. I wish it would happen, but I don't think that that's something that's likely to happen over one term. The question becomes this then. Do I support someone who there's a solid chance won't be able to accomplish either because they're just telling me what they think I want to hear or that it's not possible for them to accomplish it? So they won't accomplish what they're saying, but they're saying the right things? Or do I vote for someone who isn't saying near enough the right things, but might be able to accomplish what they're saying? Becomes difficult. For me, even if I think someone's a charlatan, in this world of politics where we're so bereft of hopeful people, I mean, we had the leader of the party that we're told to vote for in Kevin McCarthy, not only did nothing and then removed as the Speaker of the House, but now is deciding with a, 3-seat majority that he's going to retire, lowering that to 2. Why? Because his feelings got hurt? That's why. That's who we have. Mitch McConnell, a person who's more concerned about the citizens of Israel and Ukraine than the citizens of this country. Those are the people leading the Republican Party. The people that stood idly by while the FBI was weaponized against voters of the guy that was supposed to be the head of their party, and that the FBI spied on that same guy in his presidential campaign. So, in that world, Vivek's a star, as far as I'm concerned, when the alternative is those sort of bland rhino people that are working for the establishment. But am I optimistic that he could win? No. Am I optimistic that if he did win, he would be able to accomplish these things? Probably not. All right, I think we have another request. Oh, my goodness. Here's someone who will talk. My good friend, Hockey Nuts, also known as my real-life friend, Carlos, one of my favorite people that I've met through politics. How are you doing, Carlos? I hope the family's doing well. We haven't talked in a while. I hope everything's going great.
Greetings from Williamsport. How are you?
Doing great. Hanging up Christmas lights later tonight, so I'm in a good mood, so...
Thank you for giving me a short audience here, and greetings to everybody else. I am a Trump supporter. I will be voting for Donald Trump because I want revenge. Not for Donald Trump, but for what these people have done to this country, starting with the fact that where's all this money coming from that we're giving to the Ukraine? Why are we not talking about these things? Where is the money coming from? It's nice what Vivek said yesterday, with respect to you people say that you know what you're doing, but you can't even name 3 provinces in the Ukraine. And further than that, I would love to be able to go out and have a man on the street interview to see what percentage of Americans know where the Ukraine is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we could do a second follow-up question and ask them where Taiwan is. So these are the things that concern me. You are correct. I have been brought, not kicking and screaming, but ideologically to your side of the fence, and I am now there completely. My number one issue now is corruption, and no one asked about the corruption that's happening with the Biden administration and with the Democratic Party in general, because let's face it, I do like Ron DeSantis a lot. I think that he is a great governor and should remain so, because I do not think that he is built to be able to battle what the Democrats have in store for us in 2024.
That's a fair point. Carlos, here's something you're the only person I know that I could talk to about this stuff. So I wanted to ask you this. As you know, I do a lot of streams with people that are DeSantis or bust, right? They're not going to vote for Trump. And some of their criticisms are legitimate. You've heard me make similar criticisms of, Trump said he would drain the swamp, then he appointed people like
They're valid.
Right.
They're valid.
That's absolutely correct. What do you think about this line of thinking? All right. I think that a bigger threat to the Democratic establishment than Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis at this point being president is Elon Musk maintaining control of Twitter. Because I think that people are waking up. People, like, for example, people are seeing the other day the presidents of Penn and Harvard say, the same people that told us that it's violence to misgender someone and that you can have curriculum on anti-whiteness, right? Now saying, well, we're not so sure that calling for genocide of Jewish peoples is harassment or hate speech. We're not so sure. Now, you can't misgender someone. You can't do that. You can't ask someone where they're from if they appear to be a person of color. That's a microaggression. But you can call for the genocide if they're Jewish or if they're white or something like. People are starting to wake up, I think. Now, they're going to have to be drugged, kicking and screaming, but they're starting to wake up. So my response to someone that's DeSantis or bust, that's basically making the argument like, listen, if it's not DeSantis, we don't want Trump because we don't like him for various reasons and we don't think he'll really drain the swamp. And so we'll suffer another 4 years of Biden or of Newsom. And that's better than 4 years of Trump because he won't do anything and stand pat. I think we're so bad politically in this country that standing pat is a victory. And it's not a victory in the sense of that's all I want. Of course I want someone who's actually going to take political action against this corruption. But at the very least, if we prevent, through the actions of people like the FBI, the Biden administration, etc., of the mass censorship of places like Twitter, and the going after of people like Elon Musk, and the arresting of people like parents at school board meetings or people that just happen to be peaceful on January 6th, I think that culturally we're catching up and that the pendulum's starting to swing. So even if you're the type of person that thinks, well, Trump's a blowhard and, he won't drain the swamp if he's elected, you should still support him because at least he won't actively be going after people like me and you who actually are, I'm not saying me and you personally, but people like that are actually starting to move the pendulum culturally because people are waking up to how insane the authoritarian left is.
Did you watch the presidents of these universities yesterday and the videos that they made?
Yeah, when
and the cards that they read off screen?
Yeah, I could translate that for you. Here's what it was. I'd just like to apologize that the Jewish donors to this school have expressed sympathy that they would like me removed from my seat. So now I'm trying to keep my phony baloney jobs and the donor money coming in, but I really don't give a shit if you say you want to kill every Jewish person. It means nothing to me. Did you see how they laughed about it? How she was like smirking and smiling, the one from Penn, when she was asked these questions? But now all of a sudden she's very solemn. Yeah, losing all of your donors will do that.
Well, the point I'm trying to make, although I understand what you're saying, and it's valid, but the point I'm trying to make is that she is not authentic. This was not a reply where she took the camera and she spoke into the camera and said, this is what I feel, and I'm sorry that it was a miscommunication and I will do better. She read off of cards. Do you think that Elon Musk would ever do that?
Of course not.
I mean, the last thing that we heard from Elon Musk was he was running down the people that were blackmailing him, and he didn't need cards to be able to tell you how he felt.
He said, "Fuck
so
you."
The fight is over, Rob. The fight is over. Elon won. He has been able to convey to many, many people, even the people that don't care, that he is one of us.
Yeah, and I don't think he's perfect, and nor should a mistake.
No, he's not.
That's right.
But are you?
No,
are you
of
perfect?
course not.
Because I'm not.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's 12:15, and I can't tell you how many times I've screwed up today. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not perfect.
Right.
And that's why the same thing with Donald Trump. He is not perfect.
Right.
And you said something great this morning. You said, he's petty. But I'd rather be petty than what the opposition is.
Right.
Cheating and lying. And I could go on. Most of the people that are listening here don't need, a lot of esoterica to understand what we're dealing with in our country. But I believe that 45 is the only person that can bring a fight for us to be able to get our sea legs to be able to continue to learn how to fight and to respond to the mess that we're in financially. I heard yesterday somewhere, and I don't know if this is true. I'm not an economist. I don't watch these things very, very closely beyond my personal finances, but like the debt load on the debt that we have is $1 trillion. That's just the interest on the debt. $1 trillion is the interest on the debt. Where are we getting this money, Rob?
Right.
Rob,
well, you know where you're getting.
Are you lending the government money?
Well, in effect, through inflation. That's where we're getting. I mean, if you really want to listen to what's his name, Milei or whatever from Argentina, he gave an excellent speech the other day where he talks about how when you have the government printing money and loaning money, the people that get their hands on it first are the people that benefit. It's the people that get it last. That's me and you, the blue collar worker, the people at the bottom. We're the ones that end up paying. Wealth isn't like it's. Yes, it could always be growing. It's not totally zero sum, but it is zero sum when you're talking about like the amount of currency. And so if someone's benefiting, if we print $1 trillion and give it to Afghanistan, someone's paying for it. It's not just free. And who's going to pay for it? It ain't Raytheon. It ain't the politicians in Washington. It's not Joe Biden and his family. They're all getting rich. So who's paying for it?
That's the thing, Rob, that annoys me the most about Ukraine. It's not that I'm not sympathetic. I'm not a monster, okay? But do you really believe that congressional monies that go to Ukraine aren't a pass-through for Biden?
Of course not. This is how the game's worked for years.
So why do we continue? Right, exactly. And this is why, you have to wonder, when you say you're a Republican, there has to be a forensic investigation of your claim. I mean, look at us in Pennsylvania. Okay, our state party apparatus hates us. They hate us.
Yep, I totally agree. Yeah, I'll just say this real quick.
The same people that were there in 2019 are still there today, and we've lost both seats in the Senate and the governorship.
Do you remember, let's look at the speakers of the House under Republicans. Let's go back. You remember when Boehner was out? It was obvious he hated his supporters. How about Paul Ryan, right? How about Kevin McCarthy? We continue to have people at the top. No, don't get me wrong. The Democrats' leaders hate the Democratic people.
We can't have Jordan.
Right.
Certainly, he's
Right.
the bad guy.
Right. The Democratic leaders don't give two hoots for their voters either. They don't. Except at least they pretend to pay lip service to them. At least they'll pretend.
Right.
The Republican leaders can barely withhold their contempt. You go look at, like, and I do have to get to other speakers here, Carlos, but
Yes,
here's
I'm sorry.
something. Oh, no. I love it. Go look at Brian Kilmeade talking to Vivek last night or this morning. I think it was last night, but I saw it this morning, where he's just bashing Vivek about, how dare you not want to send money and troops to Ukraine? How dare you? You're blah, 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 blah. And Vivek finally is just like, like calls him out. Like, you're supposed to be a media person that like asks a question and let me answer. But instead he's sitting there screaming and losing his head. Do you think Brian Kilmeade's losing his head like that over, I don't know, the complete and total weaponization of the, DOJ, going after parents at school boards, going after people that were peaceful on January 6th, spying, the illegal spying apparatus of the FBI on Trump in 2016? No, they don't raise their anger for that. Even the new speaker of the House, he had to come. The first thing he had to talk about was about send money and stuff to Israel. Got to send that money. Couldn't be bothered to speak about, I don't know, things like border security, weaponization of the DOJ. So yeah, they absolutely, you're right. And the other thing I'll say, I wanted to comment on what you said is, when we have a party of people that refuse to fight for us, a guy who will fight because he is petty seems like a godsend. So I'll take pettiness and vengeance if it means actually fighting for once.
I apologize in advance, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Other than that, enjoy God's love, and for God's sake, go to the movies.
Thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
I love you, bro.
All right, take it easy. Love you. All right, Jamal, I'll get to you briefly here. Let's go with Tainted. You requested next, so go ahead, Tainted. Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, man.
Okay, so I was just going to say that the whole DeSantis versus Trump thing and holding your nose despite your face, just not vote for Trump if DeSantis isn't there, kind of seems a little ridiculous to me, because if you really think about it, more than likely the whole economic turmoil that we're in right now is going to end in probably 4 years or 5 years. And so then you're going to have a Democrat that's in a growing economy and more than likely is going to get reelected. So you're not really saying, oh, well, I'll hold my nose, and then for Biden for 4 years, you're saying, really, I'm going to hold my nose for 12 years until I get a Republican in. And so it seems a little ridiculous that you're willing to gamble on the fact that we're going to have 12 years of a Democrat versus just 4 years of a guy that you just don't like in mean tweets. And that's all I really could say about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely sorry, my mic was up. Yeah, it's definitely a reasonable point. I think it's a question that a lot of the DeSantis people, which don't get me wrong, I love most of these DeSantis people. Like John Burke's one of them. I love John. I do a show with John. I love most of that audience. I do, I share their affinity for Ron DeSantis. I don't think that their hatred of Donald Trump should be enough to outweigh, having another Biden 4 years. And one of the questions that I've asked is, if your main goal is, if DeSantis can't win now, then I want him in 2028, is he in a better position to win if we have 4 years of a Trump presidency or 4 years of a Biden or Newsom presidency? And they seem to think that it's open and shut. Oh, if Trump wins, then DeSantis has no chance in 2028. I don't see that at all. First off, it's difficult to predict out more than 4 years anyways, because anything could happen. Like, anything could happen. You could have, DeSantis could have a health scare. DeSantis could decide, you know what? The world of politics is so scummy, I'd rather spend time with my family. And who could blame him? Or DeSantis might do something, get involved in a scandal or a policy that makes him very unappealing to the people that are supporting him now. Anything could happen. So I think it's always a mistake to be basing your decision on, well, I'm willing to accept pain now because I think 5 years from now it sets my guy up better. But even aside from all of that, I think that there is a clear path for DeSantis, if Trump would win in 2024, to be the guy that comes in. There will be, are any of us under the misapprehension that if Trump wins the presidency in 2024 that things are going to be perfect? No, of course not. You don't think there'll be room if Trump comes out and says, okay, I can't run again, but Don Jr. is going to run and he's just going to continue my policies. You don't think there will be room for DeSantis to say, hey, I think Trump did good. Congrats to him for winning. I was happy to help his administration, but here's some things I think that I would have done differently that would be better. Of course there'll be room for that. And what's the alternative going to be? Are people that otherwise would have voted for DeSantis going, nah, I think I'll vote for Gavin Newsom instead. I think I'll go back to left-wing authoritarianism. Whereas, like you said, one of the possibilities is if we have a Biden presidency, what if the economy starts to, I think you're optimistic that the economy will be good for the next 4 years.
And I'm not even saying that it's going to be good. It's just that it'll be recovering.
Right,
so
right.
They can sit there and point.
Right.
And say, oh, well, we did that.
Right. If they're able to
win. When you break Ukraine and Russia or the Israel, I mean, most wars don't last for 20 years. They might only last for 5 years.
Well, it's a fair point. And if they're able to win when things are so bad now, if things are bad but not quite as bad as they are now, they'll probably be able to win again in 2028. But it could go so many other ways. We could be involved in another war, right? Like, let's say that another 9/11 type thing happens a year before the election. Like, people forget because they think of the Iraq War and everything. But post 9/11, George W. Bush was incredibly popular because we tend to come together as a country if there's an incredibly heinous attack on our country. Rightfully so. Like, you understand why that's the case. So, again, I think it's a massive folly to try to predict to 2028 and saying, and I'll be honest here, some, not all of this, I'm not talking about John or the people I've talked to in that audience, but some of the big DeSantis people and accounts that you see, for them it's more personal. They're wondering how they could position themselves to benefit personally, and so a lot of these people maybe didn't like Trump in the first place, but it was difficult for them to speak up because they saw the momentum in the party going that way. And so they are afraid they would lose their personal input as far as like their channel growth or their reach or something like that. But what I will lump the people like John and them in with is that, and I'm not saying this is necessarily, well, I don't agree with this, but I understand where they're coming from, is they just hate how petty and spiteful and mean-spirited Trump could be. And it's when it was directed at people that they didn't like, that they felt deserved it, it was like, okay. But when it's directed at good people like Ron DeSantis or his wife, they're like, no, I can't stand for that. I don't want this guy. And they also see a bunch of people that have, in their words, grifted for Trump. And they're not wrong about this. There are a lot of those people. And they're like, we hate these people so bad that we'd rather see Trump go down. If Trump goes down, these people will disappear forever. I think it's a mistake to ignore the actual real world ramifications that this authoritarian democratic fascist regime are bringing in, how people are losing their homes, their livelihoods, are being locked up, are being censored, are driving us closer to World War III. It's a mistake to forgive all of that or to say that's less important than Trump's mean-spiritedness or the grifters that have surrounded it. I think that's an incredible mistake. Incredible. And I hope to wake people up from that because I think that I'm not going to dissuade them that Trump's better than DeSantis. I really don't care to. Right now I'm voting for DeSantis. So that's not my goal. But there won't be a chance if DeSantis people decide we're not going to vote for Trump or if Trump people decide we're not going to vote for DeSantis. Equally are the people that think, I'm so upset that DeSantis decided to run against Trump. It divided what he was able to do in primary season. If he would have just waited his turn, then Trump would have been in a better position. So I'll never vote for DeSantis. Huge mistake. It's a huge mistake to take that stuff personally or to take these character flaws or insults and things like that so to heart that you're willing to suffer another 4 years of a Democratic administration that's literally going to lock up pro-life people? That's going to send all of our money to foreign countries? That's going to get us involved in World War III? That's going to use its own FBI to censor you on social media platforms? That's going to do their best to end places like Rumble and places like X, where this sort of speech is the only place that it could occur? That's what you're going to support because you're tired of Trump people making fun of Ron DeSantis' wife? I think it's a huge mistake. That's how I look at it. All right, Jamal. Great to hear from you, man. Go ahead.
Hey, Rob, what's going on? Well, I'm going to say like this. Last night when I was watching the debate, I said it. The winner, of course, to me personally, was President Trump. He was the winner. Why? Because no matter, even people are saying, oh, Donald Trump should be there, he debate. Well, the people who are voting don't feel that way. The people who are voting are saying, hey, we already know what we're getting. Now, on the stage, Ron DeSantis took it. And Vivek Ramaswamy came in second. And they took on the establishment with Nikki Haley and Christie because they teamed up and Ron DeSantis and Vivek. And I'm going to say this. if President Trump does not win, I think I see Ron DeSantis running mate. It's going to be Vivek Ramaswamy, because he's going to want to unite the party, say, hey, President Trump didn't win, I beat him, but hey, Vivek shares the same thing. You know Donald Trump is not going to be vice president. I think that will unite the party. One of the things I hear people say they criticize President Trump about is the Second Amendment. And the people who do it really aren't making, to me personally, good faith arguments. Because if you ask somebody, okay, what era of the Second Amendment do you support? And then when they say, well, what you mean? I say, do you believe in the 1791 Second Amendment? Do you believe you should have any rifle, any gun you want that you can afford? Do you believe that you should have to be able to get a firearm at any age? Do you believe a person that's a felon, and once they serve their time, they can get that firearm back? Do you believe people should be the man that's convicted of domestic violence? Do you believe he should be able to get his firearm? When these people start listing off no, okay then, so how can you criticize President Trump on the Second Amendment when you believe in restrictions on the Second Amendment for certain people? And to me, when you say that, oh, you're a Trump cultist, no, that's a fact. Unless you are a 1791 Second Amendment supporter, if you believe in restrictions on the second, and guess what? You can't complain about President Trump. Yes. Did he ban bump stock? Yes, he did. And I always tell people the truth. Did he ban it? Yes, he did. But also the courts, the Trump judges will be assigned, overturned them. When you're dealing with people who say, well, Donald Trump, he didn't defeat the swamp. Have people actually forgot what Donald Trump went through trying to drain the swamp? Like when someone says, well, Donald Trump promised to get rid of Obamacare. Do we honestly forget who stopped him? Did we forget who stopped Donald Trump from removing Obamacare? It's so, to me, a lot of people who make complaints about President Trump aren't really being fair to say, did he actually make an attempt and try? Yes. Why do so many people in the media and liberals hate Donald Trump? Because he actually listens to the base. He actually takes time and listens to the base.
So there's a lot to unpack here, and I think I agree with you on some, and some that I'm going to disagree. What I agree with you on,
Rob.
Yeah, what I agree with you on is it is like I do believe in restrictions on access to weapons. I've had this debate with people. I consider myself libertarian adjacent, but there are certainly people that are more libertarian to me. For example, one could ask, should you be allowed to own a nuclear weapon? I would say no. However, a person could say, well, the reasonable extrapolation of no restrictions on your right to keep and bear arms would be any type of armament, which could include a nuclear weapon or a biological weapon. I would disagree with that. I think that there are reasonable extrapolations, and some of those reasonable extrapolations are exactly what you talked about. For example, I have the right to free speech in the First Amendment. I have the right to peaceful assembly. I have the right to keep and bear arms according to the Second Amendment. Does that mean that I have the right to talk to whoever I want or go wherever I want or to have a firearm if I'm in prison? Well, no. Those rights are allowed to be restricted at that point. We understand that even with the Bill of Rights, that there are times when you could forego those rights because of actions that you've taken. Similarly, although it's different, I think there are reasonable limitations. Now, the problem becomes then how do you prevent the left from saying, well, then AR-15s are also a weapon of war that you shouldn't be allowed to happen? Well, you say that if something's a weapon of mass destruction, and you could label it in a very specific way, like a weapon that in one, would be able to change the outcome of a war, like a biological or weapons that we consider basically against the Geneva Convention. Other than that, yeah, you should absolutely be allowed to own like AR-15s. You should be allowed to own AK-47s and full autos. As far as I'm concerned. Go ahead.
Hey, Rod, let me say this, okay? Well, when you were saying there should be certain restrictions, and if you are incarcerated, that's how it was back in 1868. That's how it was in 1791. If you were in prison, and that's what I mean by going back to that era. If you were in prison, you don't get a firearm. They didn't give prisoners firearms back then. So that argument, of course, and then if you say, well, what about a nuclear weapon? Of course, that type of money, no one could be afforded. If people want to say, no, okay, on that, people want to say, well, you can't own a nuclear weapon. If someone wants to try and the government says no, then yes, the government has the right. But when you restrict things like my favorite weapon is the Thompson submachine gun. Did you know Congress banned that in 1934? You cannot own a Thompson submachine gun unless you go through a federal license. You have the federal license. You got to have federal backgrounds. I mean, this gun is totally banned to where if you get caught with one without your license and everything, you can be arrested. And I'm not talking about a felon. I'm talking about irregular American citizens with no convictions because the government totally banned it. And that put us on this road of saying, hey, you can own this, because they used to sell Thompson submachine guns like at Belt Towers or something like that. If you look at an old magazine, they showed a cowboy defending his ranch from rustlers with a Thompson. Yeah. And you could buy it. You could buy it from a regular gun store. But they banned it and it put us on this road. And then when people say, well, Donald Trump, he's not pro 2A. Yes, he is. For what standard of pro 2A are you talking about? Because people say, well, felons shouldn't have firearms. A man who him and his wife got into a fight shouldn't have firearms. People who are criticizing President Trump will have the same amount of list of reasons to restrict someone else from having a firearm.
No, I don't disagree with a lot of that, but I will say this. I don't think that Trump is pro-Second Amendment, and I'll tell you why. I don't think Trump's an ideologue. I don't think Trump's ever put much thought in it. I don't think Trump's necessarily anti-Second Amendment. I think to Trump, it's an issue that he probably never really felt strongly about. When Trump came into office, there are two types of presidencies that we could have. You could have a disruptor, a demolisher, whatever term you want to say, or you could have a builder. You could have a person that's like, we're going to tear down systems that are corrupt, or you could have a person that says we need to build up, things that will work best for this country. Our politics have become so corrupted that what was needed in 2016 and what's needed now is a disruptor. Now, can you theoretically be a disruptor and a builder? Possibly, but you need to tear down. Like, for example, you can't operate when the premier intelligence and law enforcement system in the entire world, in the history of the world, the most expensive, the most thorough, the one with the most tools to ruin your life, the FBI and places like the NSA and the CIA, when they are operating as enemies of domestic people in this country because they don't like their politics,
sir.
You can't build up from that. You can't be like, well, we'll trust the FBI to prosecute the war on drugs. As their number one concern right now is MAGA people. You can't do that. And that's what Trump was. He was a disruptor. And to be a disruptor in Trump's situation, or to be a disruptor that could be elected to president of the United States, took a very unique set of circumstances. For example, if you're a disruptor, if I'm a disruptor, me, robnoerr, who happens to make, lives paycheck to paycheck, how in the world with no connections, who's lived in rural Pennsylvania, I never had a family member that ever went to college before me, right? I never had a family member that's connected in DC or in politics in any way. My family never even voted until Donald Trump ran. Never voted, my parents, right? And so how was I going to be president? How am I? Well, the way I would do it is start young, working in politics, making connections. Then I'd have to get donors and this. It's very hard to be a disruptor and be effective coming from that because you build up all these relationships which you're then dependent on. So how can you just shatter those when you come into office? And you're not going to win if you don't have those relationships. Trump's in a unique situation in that he was a billionaire. He was able to forgo all of that. He had FU money, just like Elon Musk does.
Yes, he did.
And so they're able to say, that's why someone like him and Musk are able to say, F you, I'm going to do it my way. I don't need these. That's why they hated Trump. It wasn't that Trump was playing 4D chess that caused the corruption to be outed. It's because the people that have a stranglehold on power in the Republican and Democratic Party and the bureaucratic state said, here's a guy that we might not be able to control. Now, they may have been able to control him if instead of attacking him, they would have buttered him up and been his buddy and this and that. And then all of a sudden, instead of the Avengers putting out commercials like Donald Trump's a threat to this country, if they would have been
God, I hated that.
Right. But
I hated that.
Who knows what would have happened if they would have been like, Trump, we're going to put you in, man. You're going to be in the Iron Man outfit in the next movie. Who the hell knows what would have happened? But Trump...
Well, how about Hollywood stay out of it? Hey, Rob, I got to go run back up under the house because my lunch is over. Sure. But I'm still listening to you, but I got to run. I got to go back up under the house.
Thank you, Jamal. Yep, I'll finish it up, and then we'll get to why am I back. But yeah, thanks for always appreciate hearing from you, Jamal. So I don't think Trump's an ideologue, though. I don't think Trump's someone that's like, oh, I'm a staunch constitutionalist. I'm a staunch defender of the Second Amendment. I'm a staunch defender of the First Amendment. I think Trump somewhat of a disruptor and somewhat of an egomaniac. which isn't necessarily, like Carlos said earlier, I said he was petty. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not. To get to Trump's position, you have to be somewhat of an egomaniac and sociopath. Like, you're not going to be the type of person that's like, oh, I'm a family man. You know, I don't need to have insane piles of money to be happy as long as I have enough. Like, to accumulate that much wealth and stuff, it takes a type of person that might not be the type of person that me and you are hanging out with on the weekend, that we would think are the most friendly people or something like that. And his goal has been to accumulate wealth and power and, you know, things like that. I never got the impression before Trump ran for president, you know, when I'm watching him like on WWE, you know, taking Stone Cold Stunners and things like that, I didn't get the impression like, here's a man who really respects the Second Amendment. Here's a man who really cares about the Bill of Rights. Here's a guy who's reading, you know, the Federalist Papers every night before he goes to bed. I never got that impression. I got the impression that he was a disruptor. That he looked around and was like, yeah, I'm a businessman who's seen how corrupt these systems are. I'm going to get involved in these systems and try to end the corruption so businessmen like me can flourish. And that would be better for everyone. And I believe he believed that it would be better for the people in the country to end this corruption. I believe he believed that, you know. But he also wanted people to kind of pat him on the back and say, yay, do it. You're a good job. This is why I fought with the QAnon people so much. Trump, to me, was unique in that because he's not an ideologue, you might say, well, that's bad. He's not a big pro-Second Amendment guy. Right, but that also means you could persuade him. If his audience was like, no, you're making a mistake, don't do it, he was more likely to listen to them than anyone else. For example, Ron DeSantis seems more of an ideologue to me. He seems like someone who actually cares more about the Constitution and things like that. So if we, as Ron DeSantis supporters, think that he's going in the wrong direction, he's probably more likely to say, but I've already made my opinion up on what I see as constitutional principles, and I'm going to follow them. Now, that's good in a lot of ways, because that means Ron DeSantis isn't likely to be swept up in a tide of, you know, in-the-moment public opinion. That's good. But it also could be beneficial to be the other way if it's like, well, wait a minute, we finally have a president that's willing to listen to us? And so when he makes a mistake on the Second Amendment, we could say, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's wrong, right? And he'll be like, oh, okay. Maybe I'll change my mind now that my supporters... Unfortunately, there were so many supporters that surrounded Trump that said you can never criticize him. And to me, those people harmed our actual chances. And to me, the issue that matters, that's an even better example of this, is sort of corruption. He surrounded himself with people like Bill Barr, who covered up the corruption at the FBI, and he listened to Bill Barr, and he listened to all these QAnon people that were saying, like, trust the plan. Bill Barr's going to weed it all out. And then what happened? If he would have listened to people like me, people saying, no, this shit's corrupt. Don't listen to the Career Washington people telling you, hey, you know, you gotta just wait, follow norms, we'll take care of it, blah, blah, blah. So I think that Trump probably, his knowledge of the Second Amendment is probably what he's reading in The New Yorker or what he hears on Fox and Friends in the morning, you know? And so if they're like, oh, another mass school shooting, we got to do something about guns. He's like, yes, do something about guns. Oh, the Vegas shooter used bump stocks. Do something about bump stocks. And he's not really looking into it any further than that. Whereas the people that are staunch Second Amendment people are like, no, you have no idea what you're talking about. You know, so I do disagree there. I think that Trump was weak on the Second Amendment, but there was room for improving. The question then becomes, though, like going forward, are we at the point where we still need a disruptor, or are we now at the point where we don't need a disruptor? And I think there is no question in my mind that you have to demolish before you can build up, and we haven't demolished near enough. So that's my thoughts on it. So, but I understand. I completely sympathize with the people that say Donald Trump was weak on the Second Amendment, and you know, I think that's a really terrible thing. I agree. I think he was weak. Now, those people might think I'm weak on the Second Amendment. Like my friend EOD's in the chat. He says, why not? You should be allowed to own a nuclear weapon. I'd love to have that debate with you someday, because then the next extrapolation would be like, okay, let's say I want to do gain of function on COVID viruses for a weapon, not to develop. I just want to make lethal COVID viruses for a weapon. You cool with that? Would you be all right with that? Just curious. Right, you wouldn't be. Why not? If it's for a weapon, same argument with the nuclear weapon. So that's what I'm saying. Right, we have international laws governing the acquisition of nuclear weapons as well. So, you know, So, anyways, that's what I feel. Now, sorry. Oh my gosh, did we lose? I'm so sorry. I wanted to get. There was another person that wanted to talk, and I rambled on too long, and apparently they've left. If you happen to reconnect, just let me know. I'm so sorry about that, but I think that was a DeSantis supporter, so I was hoping they were going to yell at me or yell at Jamal. I thought that'd be fun, but yeah, you know, someone says our choice are Israel, Israel, Israel. Is it? Is that our choice? I wouldn't disagree with you that it seems like we have choice of people that don't care about the citizens of the United States of America. Seems there's at least some people on the left that would be more than happy to vote for the wiping of Israel off the face of the earth. Right? I think that Vivek, no, it's interesting. I think there's an interesting argument as to why Vivek supports possibly sending troops to defend Taiwan, but not Israel. It's an interesting argument. I guess you could say because we're more economically entwined. Taiwan. Oh, I heard a beep. Let's see if the speaker's back. Don't see. What was the beep? So, why is my thing beeping? Is someone requesting speaker permission over and over? Is that what's going on? Anyways. Oh, wait. Work call. Oh, for God's sakes. So, anything else people wanted to talk about specifically? So those are my thoughts on the debates. You know, I could get into the specific issues that they talked about. For me, the corruption thing was the most important. I gave my grades on what I thought. There's EOD. Does EOD want to come in and talk about nuclear weapons? By the way, if you're just tuning in, EOD696, you should follow him on Twitch. Someone I really enjoy listening to, particularly on late nights, you know, when I'm just doing my paperwork. I always enjoy tuning into him. So consider giving him a follow on Twitch. I don't think you'll be disappointed in it. Let's see. Status. Let's see what this is. Oh, thank you. There he is. What's happening, EOD? How you doing this fine day? Give him a chance to get his mic working here.
Unmute. There we go. Okay,
Hey.
I'm sorry. I'm new to this. I've never done the Twitter Spaces thing.
No problem. So what's happening?
Right. You want to talk about weapons?
Sure.
So I said in your chat that everybody should have nuclear weapons. That there shouldn't be any restrictions on that. So, like, when I said that, like, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that it's extremely, cost prohibitive to obtain something of that nature in the first fucking place. So the only people we're talking about is somebody like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, people who have, platforms in rocket technology in the first place. And I don't know, when I sit here and I think about it, it's like they're not that far away from it anyhow. What would it really take to strap a warhead to a Falcon 9 and send it to Russia? You know what I mean? Like we're so close to that threshold that I feel like it's really a small give to say, yeah, actually that's not technically illegal insofar as the Constitution is concerned. But you rightly brought up, what if I wanted to develop a biological fucking weapon? And that's a problem. That's a serious problem that I had not actually thought about.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, just nuclear specifically, just to focus on that, it is cost prohibitive, absolutely. But the question is, will it be in 50 years? I mean, if you would have told me 20 years ago that we'd have 3D printers, I'd have said you're full of shit. I was like, that sounds like something out of Star Trek. Who knows where we'll be in 50, 60 years? Like with, you may be able to develop a nuclear weapon for $10 million. Now, it's not going to have the payload capacity of something of like a military equivalent, but it might be able to do something like blow up a city mile or something. What are we... what is the potential limit? I think it's always been, for me, the most likely WMD to wipe us all out has always been biological, because biological is cheap. It's cheap to develop a biological weapon, and it does the work for you, right? It spreads perpetually on its own, and so, like, you could easily see, even in today's world, someone getting themselves hands on an advanced, gain of function advanced, smallpox or something like that, and unleashing it. And are we prepared to say, if your neighbor down the street works at a biolab and it's like, yeah, I brought home some, biological smallpox that, so the tax collector's not coming to my fucking door, tyranny of the government. I have the right to arm myself. Fuck you. Like, are we cool with that? Because
yeah, that is pushing it.
And it does, and like for me, like I think the question becomes, as is everything that when you talk, like I'm sure EOT, you've been on these online spaces for a long time, like I have. Like there are people that are complete. Like for me, the metric to which look at government is total government control or no existence of the government. So total state control or no state. So the complete communist authoritarian would say state controls everything, and the complete radical like anarcho-communist would say no state. Right. And if you're in one of those two positions, it makes it easy. Right. Because then you come up with a topic, like speed limit. Well, the authoritarian will say the government has the right to tell you exactly how fast you can drive, when you can drive, where you can drive. So speed limit's easy. And the anarcho-capitalist says, what are you talking about? There should be no limit to anything. You should be allowed to drive whatever you want. State doesn't have the right to enforce it. Right. But then how do me and you that would say, well, both of those sides wrong, how do we determine what the speed limit is? You might say 60, I might say 55. And you'll be like, but wait a minute. How do you make that differentiation between 50 and 55 and 60? And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to say this is exactly where my threshold is, right? Yeah. And this sounds like a dumb argument, but now take it to the Second Amendment, right? If we could say, okay, clearly you have the right to own firearms. So the complete authoritarian that would say, nope, only the government owns any sort of weapon. No person's allowed to have a weapon. And the complete anarcho-communist would say any weapon you want, for any circumstances, no matter what your background is, no matter what the weapon is, no matter how you got it, you're allowed to have any weapon you want. And we might say, well, you can't. You might say, well, you can have a nuclear, but you can't have biological. And I'd say, well, what's the difference? Where's the threshold? Or I might say, but then your argument to me is going to be if I say, I think you should be allowed to have an AK, I think you should be allowed to have fully auto, and you'll say, okay, but the Democrats disagree. So how do you draw that differentiation? If you say you can't have a nuclear weapon, they say we agree and you can't have an AK. So how do you draw that distinction? That's the difficulty of debating without being on the absurd extreme of either side. You have to come up with arguments in the moment that differentiate these thresholds, and it's very difficult. It is. I would just say to me that the level of restriction I put on what I would call a weapon of mass destruction, what I'm terming a weapon of mass destruction is like a weapon that would be designed to inflict mass casualty by its very existence. So a biological weapon is that, a chemical weapon is that, a nuclear weapon is that. An AK-47...
a bomb, though, right?
Well, right. Should you be allowed to own bombs?
Well, if I'm a pyrotechnics, specialist, and like I shoot fireworks off for a living, and some of those have to be custom made, right? That shouldn't be against the free.
Well, I agree with that, but that's not a weapon, right? That's regulations that we put anyways, and that's not someone that's like, I own this 10-ton bomb, because it's necessary for my job because I make railroad tunnels through mountains, and so I need to use this. Or I own these explosives because, I put on fireworks shows for, mass groups of people, so they have to be above and beyond what the average person would use. Those are different. But to say that, like, well, I own this shit because it's my God-given right to own this weapon and to keep and bear arms against government tyranny, so I'm holding on to this bomb in case the government comes for me, that's iffy. That seems to be so I'm persuadable on things like tanks. I really am, believe it or not. I think you should probably be allowed to own some sort of tank. But when you start to talk about weapons that by their pure designation are designed to be indiscriminate mass casualty weapons, I don't know that the same flies. I think that I can make the case that a fully automatic weapon is still one intended for personal use, that could be directed at a single target, right? Like you're not going to be able to direct a biological weapon unless you're like playing Metal Gear Solid and you develop Fox-9, some shit where you developed
let's extrapolate this to the tank example, though. Like you said, that there's an argument to be made for people to own tanks, and there's a few people who do, but they tend to end up being disarmed, or all of the munitions or everything has been taken away from them. But in these instances, if these were, if I could go down to the Army surplus store and take out a lease on a F-16 that has carpet bombs attached to it or Moabs, like that. I feel like that sort of breaches your threshold too, and so does a tank, unfortunately, right? Like you can't point a tank, you can't use a tank in self-defense, right? Like,
well, a tank, it's also a vehicle, which is maybe a distinction that doesn't matter, right? But like theoretically, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It is. I would say that the reason I put the fact that it's not just a weapon, that it's also like, let's say that you took. Now, I'm going to exhibit my lack of understanding of firearms, but I would assume that it would hypothetically be possible to take the gun off of a tank, right, and make a caliber of weapon that is stationary, right, like almost like a mortar or something, something like that, that necessarily wouldn't be attached to the vehicle. Would we consider the caliber of tank or a caliber of weapon that a tank uses to be something designed to inflict mass casualties? I would think not, right?
I don't know, man. It's a big impact site.
It certainly is, but to me, it's
usually anti-vehicle engagements.
I mean, the idea, munition that a tank's usually shooting, if I understand this correctly, is basically just a large caliber shell. Now, I know there are different ones. I've seen the ones that like the Abrams use that are like designed for penetrating other heavy armor, so it's a little different than it's not just literally a giant fucking bullet, right? But to me, I think that's different to me, it seems somewhat different than an explosion. But this debate is good. I'll say this though: this debate's good because if that's where the threshold is, should you be allowed to own a tank or not? I think we're in a far better place in America than we are now, where it's like they're trying to disarm your fucking handguns and say that you can't have,
which is ridiculous. Right. Like, I mean, Joe Biden wants to outlaw all semi-automatic weapons. That's literally everything. That's literally freaking everything. And so, like, this Ranger Rogue has a good point here. He says, "Good thing 2A wasn't written for self-defense."
Yeah, that's absolutely true, right? But you can't.
Down to the,
go ahead, please.
It boils it down to the essence of what I was getting at when I was trying to say that everybody should have nukes. Is what the amendment on the book says is shall not be infringed. That's pretty damn unequivocal,
But you don't believe that. You don't believe that.
Not well.
Do you believe that so if I go to prison
talking about things like nukes and we start talking about things like biological weapons, we already have international
should I be allowed?
laws
I get sentenced to prison for beating my wife. Should I be allowed to take my AK?
No.
So then my right's been infringed.
Because you're a convicted felon. When you're convicted of a felony, you sacrifice your rights.
Okay, so that's an exception. You say, well, it can be infringed if you have done certain actions.
Okay.
So then the idea that it can't be infringed is not true. There are circumstances that we all agree, even the founding fathers would have agreed, would be times that it can be infringed. Now you might say, but that's different. Saying that you've lost your right because you've engaged, now your right could be infringed because of a personal action you've taken is differently than saying you can't have access to a certain weapon. We're infringing your rights to a certain weapon due to no faultiness you've taken yourself. I agree with that. That is different. But still, the argument that we could never infringe, I don't buy that. I think that the founding fathers quite well intended that there are opportunities or there are things that occur that you can infringe, particularly they would have all agreed if you have taken specific actions to give your rights away. None of them were for the abolishment of jails or prisons or anything like that. So, of course not. But yeah, to the greater point you're making about the idea of defense, I don't disagree. That is the intended purpose of the Second Amendment. It is to defend yourself both personally and against tyranny of the government. And it was probably more the latter than the former. And so you could say, when you're talking about mass casualty, it's different, right? Because you're assuming that you're defending yourself against a home invader or something like that. So why would you ever need a nuclear weapon? But you're not. You're defending yourself against the government, which is true. But I think there are reasonable extrapolations that there have to be limits on it. For example, if we said, well, everyone's allowed to own a nuclear weapon to defend themselves from a tyrannical government, then you would be able to say, well, I'm also allowed to own a nuclear weapon for defense against my neighbor who also owns a nuclear weapon. Right now that we all have nuclear weapons, it's now feasible for me to detonate my nuclear weapon to prevent my neighbor from detonating his nuclear weapon because I thought he was hostilely aggressing on me. And the problem is that when you develop these principles to the extreme, where you say things like, yes, every human being should be allowed to have a weapon that hypothetically, we will eventually get weapons stronger than the nuclear capable ones that we have today. That hypothetically, one of those weapons could detonate the Earth. And if we say you should absolutely have a God-given right for each individual to have that weapon, the only thing is it's cost prohibitive. I think that's insane to say that, like, literally someone could just accidentally hit the button and blow up the world. And we're like, oh, well, it was the right that everyone was allowed to have these weapons.
So again, I got to bring us back to the fact that what we're talking about is the American Constitution and the Second Amendment that was written for American citizens, right? But there's international law that kind of supersedes that sort of governs, whether or not.
Oh no, I did now. Now you're in even worse. You don't think that's even worse? So if the international community said, okay, no more firearms, that supersedes my Second Amendment right to a gun? No, that's even worse. You don't think? If the UN tomorrow comes out and says, American citizens are no longer allowed to own handguns. They can own shotguns and rifles for hunting. That's it. No handguns. You think that supersedes our Second Amendment?
No.
Of course not. So the idea that if we extrapolate the United States Constitution and the Second Amendment to mean no exceptions and you're allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and the UN says, yeah, but robnoerr is not allowed to own a nuclear weapon because of international law, I would say, fuck that. My country's law supersedes that. And I'd be right to say that. I would. And then the United States government, if it had any spine whatsoever and was doing what it was supposed to, would tell the UN, kick rocks. Yeah, our people are allowed to own these nukes. And you can see it's just not feasible, right? Like, sometimes you have to be reasonable and understand that even though there is certainly the tyranny that's going on in the other direction, me and you're going to agree 100 out of 100 times that the way that this is being excused by authoritarians is designed to disarm us, to do exactly what the founding fathers feared, which was to then use government tyranny to bully us and browbeat us into submission, which is exactly why the Second Amendment's important. But that doesn't mean that in the hypothetical sense we could say there would never be any restriction whatsoever and we should all be allowed to own nuclear weapons. I think we have to be honest and say that's probably not a good idea. I think even the founding fathers would have said, like, listen, they didn't envision like world-ending weapons. They didn't envision that. Like, when they were looking at it, they probably, I could be wrong, and I'm not a student of the Second Amendment in ways that I should be, right? But I would guess that they would say, we don't give a shit if you have what's the equivalent of a battleship. Fuck it. Yeah, you're some merchant. You're getting harassed by the Barbary pirates. They used to have what was called letters of marque. I know that, like, which is if you would love this story. Like, the letters of marque is fantastic. They basically, the U.S. government, because we had all these Barbary pirates, right? They started to issue letters of marque that basically just made like regular citizens bounty hunters. So you'd get a letter of marque to just fucking brutalize these pirates, and the government would pay you for it. You were basically just basically like a fucking deputy. Yeah, and so they intended for private citizens to be able to have what would have been considered at the time military equipment, ships that were, capable of fucking some shit up. Like, they intended that.
People have taken out an entire town. I mean, part of the Barbary Wars was sending the Marines over there on a ship and absolutely waylaying these metropolises in northern Africa that were sending out the pirates in order to screw with all of Western Europe and America's economy in the first place. And they sat on the shore and just artillery bombarded these places until they surrendered. Yeah.
So I think
ultimately the resolution there.
Right. But I do think that, like, when you're talking about weapons that could cause like insane mass casualties, like a biological weapon or nuclear weapon, I think that they would have been like, well, wait a minute, that's a little different. But yeah, I think that whatever that line is, and we could argue about where specifically the line would be, I think that we could all agree that the imminent threat right now are the people that have made that line far, far, far too close to complete disarmament. And they're doing that not because their primary goal is to protect us from crime, because if they were concerned, like I say this all the time, the last data I've been able to find was 2019, but the federal felony attempted purchases, it was something like, what was the number? It was in the hundreds of thousands of potential cases came to the ATF and the FBI. You know how many they prosecuted? 4.
No, dear Lord.
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise me.
Right. So, like, what they do is
that's
they put
really the issue right there is the tyranny of the fucking executive branch and all of the huge amount of overreach that's going on. We don't need the ATF. We don't need
that's right.
The DEA. We don't need all of these different agencies to do the job of one federal law enforcement agency. It's ridiculous.
Right. And so what happens is that if it was really about protecting us from dangerous people using dangerous firearms, at the bare minimum, what they would do is the things that the law already says even if we disagree with those laws, because I think there's a solid case to be made that the majority, once you've paid your debt to society, even if you're a felony, I don't understand why you're still restricted. Now, you might say, but there are certain crimes that we would say no. For example, if you were a gangbanger that mowed down 10 people in a restaurant and you serve 40 years in prison and get out, should you be allowed to have a gun back? Maybe not. But if you're charged with some sort of felony, campaign finance, blah, 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 and you spend 5 years in jail, you shouldn't be allowed to have a gun? Horse shit. I think that's ridiculous. You paid your debt to society. Anyways, if we already have laws that are on the books that were put there by the very people saying these laws are designed to keep you safe, and those laws have been, we think these are the most dangerous people, these felonies, and therefore they shouldn't be allowed to purchase guns, and yet you refuse to enforce those laws while simultaneously telling the rest of us lawful gun owners, oh, but you need to be restricted even more. The laws are designed.
Give us your semi-auto.
Exactly. So it's designed to purposely impact lawful gun owners while intentionally allowing the most violent of people to skirt the law. So it's never been about protecting us from violent firearms. It's always been about disarming people that they politically disagree with. That's the agenda.
Yeah, and it's all under the guise of public safety and trying to do something. We need to do something about the gun violence problem in America. Well, doing something doesn't mean coming down harder on law-abiding citizens, and it's most of the people who commit these crimes are criminals in the first place, or on the FBI watch list in the first place, and they just ignore that fact, and they just oh, we need more laws. Oh, you think people who already breaking the law are going to pay attention to your new law? It's just complete nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to this, I don't know if you've listened to me lately, but I've read the Gulag Archipelago, which everyone should read. Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes from a gulag, and he has this quote about knives. I don't know if I'll be able to find... that's a different quote, but he basically has this quote. I don't know it verbatim, but it's basically like this. It's like, for the criminal to own a knife was just historic. It was just his culture. So you couldn't blame him. But for you to own a knife was anti-Soviet agitation. It made you a terrorist. For you to defend yourself with and that's true. That's the way, you can see it now. You go to a city like New York. That's exactly like bail reform and stuff. They leave these violent criminals out in the street every day. But then simultaneously, they're telling you out the other side of their mouth, we need to disarm you. You can't defend yourself. That would be a crime. For the criminal to break it, you remember, and this happens, the only reason that the public cases that they've reneged on, like, for example, you remember there was the bodega owner, you looked like an immigrant who was robbed, and it's on camera, and the guy came up with the gun, and the bodega owner takes the gun off him and shoots him, and that guy was charged. The owner, who was defending himself. And then eventually the charges were dropped, but only because there was mass outrage. That's exactly what these prosecutors intend to do. The only times they step back is when they're called out and they're shamed into coming back. But if they had it up to them, if public perception was, charge that guy, that's absolutely what they would do. And so the intended purpose is to make it criminal. They don't want the police to exist to defend you, and they don't want you the right to defend yourself, because they want you. And by the way, let me rephrase that. It's not that they don't want the police to exist. That's what everyone mistook when they said defund the police. That's not the intent. The intent is to recreate the police force to target a different enemy, you. They want the police to exist. They just want to be in control of it, and they want it to go after you. That's what they want. The biggest threat, and I'm not making this shit up. You can see it. Like, all you need to do. Yesterday, there was a clip I saw going viral of a bunch of people standing outside a restroom, refusing to allow Jewish people to use the restroom, right?
Gee, are you kidding me?
It's totally true, right? Like, these people, if given power, they view the lens through a communist lens of oppressor versus oppressed. And if you are a group that is considered historically an oppressor, you are the enemy. There is nothing they would be unwilling to do to you. And so, like, everything that they've done with the police and the military, even the military, right? Think of the people they kicked out, people that were questioning vaccines, right? Those are people that traditionally, you can almost get, what type of political orientation do you think that person would be?
Right-leaning.
And if you're going to train the military to say the biggest threat to this country are right-leaning people in this country, they're terrorists, well, it would be really unhelpful if a lot of people in the military were members of that group. But if you could find ways over decades and decades to weed those people out of law enforcement and military, then what happens when you direct law enforcement and military at those people? Well, now they comply because they've had it beaten to their head. Yes, these are the enemies. They are the greatest threat. And so they won't want those, not only do they not want the police to defend you, they want them to actively be against you if you politically disagree. And by the way, you saw the polling, like on polling, you remember when there were polls like that said this, would you rather live by a Trump supporter or an MS-13 member? And something like 60% of Democrats were saying MS-13. They believe that shit.
Oh my God. What is wrong with these people? It's because Trump attacked them at one point, and then suddenly they became the fucking idols of the apple of everybody's eye.
Yep.
And they're completely ignoring the fact that these people engage in, drug dealing and human trafficking constantly, all the time, all across the border. And, I want to go back to one of the things you were talking about with law enforcement. Like, they'll want to degrade the local law enforcement, the people who are actually walking the beat and taking care of individuals in the community, and at the same time put 87,000 armed IRS agents into the federal law enforcement arm in order to, exactly what you're saying, come after the political opposition is really what it's fucking about.
Yeah,
It's disgusting.
That's it. And so that's when you see why there's this massive push for disarmament. There's no, I don't fall down. First off, I don't begrudge anyone that's called a, quote, conspiracy theorist, because, the federal government's official stance is that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in a way that was almost impossible while two guards fell asleep, while two cameras shut off, malfunctioned and shut off. So if that's going to be their theory, I think Flat Earth's perfectly reasonable to listen to, even if I don't agree with it. So I'm not going to pick on people for conspiracy theories. But I'll say this. I don't go, mass shootings exist. They're not always the federal government used MK Ultra to convince someone to do a mass shooting. I'm not saying that's never happened, but sometimes bad people do bad shit. That's absolutely true. It's not that the government creates every crisis, but they know how to exploit everyone. And so they know that inevitably there'll be a shooting. And then they know that they'll be able to say, oh, see, it's to protect you from these violent criminals that we need to disarm. And yet, how many times do you see this? It's like, well, the FBI knew of this shooter beforehand and did nothing about it. Or this person had been arrested 4 or 5 times and had been left out, without, charges actually ever being filed, and this, that, and the other. So, they exploit these crises. It's actually damn shameful. They'll exploit something like a school shooting to tell you, someone that, for me, I live in rural Pennsylvania, that guns for self-defense, for, hunting, for protection of tyranny of the government, who's never committed a serious crime in my life. Like, the worst thing I ever got charged with was disorderly conduct, but I'm told that I have to restrict my rights to guns. Why? Because someone, across the country did something shitty, and like, it's absurd, and it's disgusting that they exploit these tragedies for these reasons. Not to mention, even if you would accept them in good faith, nothing that they're suggesting would be impactful whatsoever, right? The problem is the guns already exist. The guns exist. You can't put that back in the box. They exist. And you're not going to get them from people. You're not. Right? It's just not going to happen without years and years of radical, which is one of the things they're trying to do, culturally shame people that own guns, but they're not winning that battle. But that's the attempt, and it's ironic because half the shit they push for, right? Like, you can start to see how, like, for example, their weird intersectional pushes for constantly saying that oppressed groups need to be allies with things like the Pulse nightclub shooting, where they defend people that are, Islamic as they're oppressed, and the Democratic Party has to support them, and then they defend gay people. Well, what happens when an Islamic person shoots up a bunch of gay people? Well, the gay people are like, well, we want guns to defend ourselves. And you saw this in Orlando. There was an uptick of gay Americans that were like, we want to get trained to use firearms and buy firearms. By the way, I'm all for it. Absolutely. You should be.
That was true for BLM too.
Absolutely. Yep.
When the BLM riots were going on, a lot of black people who weren't gun owners before became lawful
exactly.
owners.
I totally. And it's so funny because you can see what our opposition thinks of us, right? Because you'll hear these Democrats say all the time, like, here's a picture of a black family owning guns. What do you think about that? I'm like, based. Good. Right?
Yeah.
Who do you think we are? Right? You have the wrong, you don't even understand who we are. We don't give a shit. Absolutely, they should have weapons and should defend themselves and their family. Yep. Hell, if I was a member of the black community that saw the history of how our FBI treated MLK, and, how they infiltrated black rights groups back in the 60s, you're goddamn right I don't own a gun. Of course I would. Right? Like, but they're attacking and
experiments.
And anyone who ever pushes this shit, remember the first pushes to take away guns from people in this country were to prevent freed slaves from having guns. Absolutely. That was the first push that they used for gun control. So, all of this, it runs afoul that they can't win that agenda because on one hand, you can't tell everyone that, like, the federal government under Donald Trump's going to be the next Nazis and they're all going to come for you. But also, it shouldn't be a good thing to own guns. That shit don't fly. So they're losing if one cultural battle they're losing is the cultural battle on guns. They're losing that battle. They can't, as much as they try, as many celebrities, I'm sure Taylor Swift will be out there at some point telling us that we're all fucking evil people for having guns. It's not going to work because there are a lot of left-wing people even that are like, nah, fuck that. I'm going to keep my gun.
Well, I mean, in every single dictatorship in the world, okay, the first thing they do when they rise to power and they take control of everything is get rid of all the guns. You can see this time and time again. There's a whole litany of examples. JP Sears does a great fucking video about it. It was probably a year ago now. It's getting on it, but it's just dictatorship after dictatorship after dictatorship. First thing they do, take away the guns, because we're about to do some shit that's going to piss everybody off, and we can't let you all resist. So,
Yep,
I mean, I feel like that's exactly what they're doing here. They want to turn America into a communist nation. They want to eradicate the Constitution, and the only way they're going to get away with that is if they take our guns.
Totally agree. Well, I'm going to end the stream here soon, EOD. I'll talk to the audience here for a minute. But thanks so much for calling in. I really always appreciate hearing from you. Everybody should check out EOD's channel on Twitch. I'm sure if you see him there on Twitter, if you go to his link, you probably have a link to your Twitch channel on your Twitter, right?
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah. But if you look up, is it 696? EOD 696 on Twitch as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So look it up on Twitch. I think usually streaming in the evening. So
usually around 8 o'clock, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We do a big panel show on Friday, so check me out.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Cheers, Rob. Have a good one.
So, just to wrap up here then. So, interesting. I don't mind. I enjoy, I think I do best. At least I think I sound best, and I hope I'm more enjoyable to people when there's audience interaction. So am I going to do AJW versus Destiny Part 2? Yeah, probably next Tuesday. I'll probably do that next Tuesday. So I like to do debate reviews on Tuesday, so maybe we'll do the rest of that. But enjoyed this spaces. Hopefully tomorrow around 11 a.m. Eastern, I'll be doing a space with John Burke. Maybe we'll talk about the debate as well, too. Doing any Crucibles soon? I like this sweater. Fuck you, Aftershock. If you're listening on Spaces, you can't see the awesome sweater that I'm wearing right now, which is awesome. I would love to get on the Crucible and debate people. That's my favorite thing to do. I love debating. I love interacting and arguing with people. So, but it was a fun show today. So I hope you enjoyed it. This recording obviously will be on my YouTube, Rumble, Twitch channels, but it'll also be up on X. You'll be able to hear the space there. So make sure you're following me on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Where do you send something for me to check out? The best place to reach me is probably my Twitter handle. Direct message me on Twitter. I have my DMs open. I know Conservative Carnage said he's been messaging me and it's not been coming through, but most other people message me and it comes through. I agree. My most entertaining videos are when I'm yelling at lefties. Those are also the videos I like doing the most. But they don't want to debate me anymore. So what can you do? They're the same people that will complain that that Trump's running from debates. They won't debate me. They know. They know. So, all right. Should be back on tomorrow around 11 a.m. Eastern. You all take it easy. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, have a good one. All right. We ended the space. To the rest of you, thanks so much. I appreciate you all. I'm going to go hang up Christmas lights. So, see what my wife made for lunch. Hopefully something non-fattening. I'm trying to lose weight. So, thank you all so much. We'll talk to you all tomorrow. As always, have a good one.